Thank you for joining us on our journey here to preserve the history of mixed martial arts. When I wanted to take on this project, I needed help. I brought in one of my favorite matchmakers, Miguel Iterade, and the MMA detective, Mike Davis. So to do this, we've been able to preserve history. Welcome and enjoy.
Hey, it's Miguel Iterade back here on the Lights Out podcast, and we have another deep dive. That means that's Mike Davis, the MMA detective. Chris Lytle will be materializing when we go live with Derrick Noble. Derrick, another one of those Midwest guys. Mike, what can you tell the people, the good people here about Derrick?
All right. Well, first and foremost, he's got a ton of fights with you. So there's going to be a lot of back and forth, which I like. I really like it because it kind of shows the depth of where you were at within the independent grind is what we refer to it as. And Derrick, 50 Fight Club member. I know he's real close on his MMA record. He's got a bunch that aren't on there. He's 100% a 50 Fight Club member. And all right, so I've always taken notes on MMA fighters and little oddities and things of that nature. So I've had a file on Derrick for a long time. And since I started taking notes, we've been doing this podcast, my notes have changed quite a bit in order to kind of meet our format. And the notes that I'm using are a little bit old, and I haven't updated them because Derrick is canceled on us at least a dozen times, I think, roughly. So
He's a busy man.
Yeah, I know he is. He's got family and stuff like that. So, I mean, it's like I probably got, I think, about 27, 28 hours of research into Derrick. I picked picked apart the significant fights, that were involved yourself and the ones that I felt were, very important to his career. However, if you guys are listening to this on iTunes, we need write whatever you want, anything you want in the reviews. Just give us 5 stars. It helps us with the algorithms. If you're on YouTube, if you can comment or subscribe and share it, you don't even have to share it. Just comment and subscribe. It helps us with the algorithms. We're not asking you guys for any money. Just give a little thumbs up and move on. It really helps us out. And it allows us, Miguel, myself, and obviously Chris, to continue putting out episodes like this. But Derrick, Miguel, you've got a long, almost a 10-year relationship with this camp, maybe even a little longer than that. And this is going to be a trip down memory lane. I have a feeling there's going to be a lot of laughs in this episode.
Yeah, he's a solid fighter. One in that weight class, he was part of a little murderer's row. I had guys I was real proud of, and guys I knew I could toss in with just about anybody in the world there. So without further ado, here's Derrick Noble.
Okay, welcome back, fans. Thank you for paying attention. Very happy we have another guy from the indie grind scene, Derrick Noble. What's happening, Derrick?
Hey, how you guys doing?
Happy to be here, my man. The routine. I got Miguel, we got Mike. We're just gonna run through an in-depth look at your career.
Sounds good.
I know Derrick. I booked him a bunch on my shows. I know he's from a small area of Illinois. At least the guys he came with are from a small area of Illinois that actually doesn't get a lot of credit for having some quality fighters. Derrick, one of those guys. So we'll get into all that stuff there. Getting close to a 50 Fight Club member. I'm not sure yet. We'll find out yet. Mike, what do we got here?
I think with his boxing matches, he definitely qualifies. Yeah,
he's probably. I think there's 4 or 5 fights that don't show up on my record that I've had.
That's what I was about to ask you.
I can't remember names. I know I fought a few times in Peoria, Illinois, that aren't on the record. Not all of the fights I had on the Silverbacks Classics, I think, show up on my record. So I don't know what
Derrick, it's so weird how back in the day some of the fights are on there, and sometimes, like if it was the unsanctioned state, they're not. Right. But sometimes they're. There's no rhyme or reason to it. But I know I've probably had 15 fights that are on there. I'm sure you had some too.
Right.
Yeah, I could add to that. So when the databases and sanctioning databases had existed for a while, and when the states came in with actual sanctioning powers, they called a lot of the promoters asking about certain fights, and the state actually would go in and delete them. I can only speak for Illinois. but I know like Illinois and Indiana, both states at that time absolutely deleted, fights, and some of them were fake. I mean, people were also submitting fake fights as well. I mean, it was like the Wild West, and it wasn't just, in someone's backyard or like an abandoned building. It was also on the internet, unfortunately. And along with some of the bad records that got wiped clean, a lot of good ones did as well. That's true.
Okay, real quick, Derrick, can you run us through, I always like to start off with your background. What got you involved with fighting? Were you a wrestler, kickboxer, football player? What the hell did you do?
I mean, I played normal sports in high school, I guess, growing up, football, basketball, baseball. But I was always into just, back then, regular martial arts, because MMA and jiu-jitsu wasn't really a thing growing up until the mid-90s, really. So it was like most of the guys in my time frame. I saw the first or second UFC, and was probably like maybe a sophomore in high school, 93, something like that. And then just started seeking out guys that I could train with. In my little small area, there wasn't a whole lot, but we had one group of guys that actually brought in several, like Cesar Gracie came in to our town, like small town, 10,000 people, Central Illinois. We had Cesar Gracie in probably like 93 or 94 to do a seminar. Got one of Half Gracie's student, Kurt. He's a pretty well-known jiu-jitsu guy in San Francisco. It was one of Half Gracie's first black belts, I think. Him in for a seminar. So we had a lot of guys that were coming in that were teaching everyone in our group of guys. So just kind of started there when I was in high school.
Nice.
Now, when you talk about Peoria, Illinois, you're talking about boondocks. Am I right?
Well, Ryan Blackorby as well.
Well, these were actually in Canton, Illinois, which like small town.
Smaller. Because like from my familiarity, you came to my awareness under Bob Long, and Bob was like a representative of several fighters there.
Right.
And for, like I said, for a boondock era, you had Phil Johns, who made a UFC appearance and held our belt. You had Jim Bruschetta, who was like a 135 pounder that, had a fight at 155 and that whole story. You know what I mean? It's like, and from there, did you run? How about Jay Buck? Do you remember Jay Buck?
Jay Buck, yeah, I fought Ironheart Crowns a lot up there, I think.
Yeah, Jay Buck was another one of those that from that Illinois area. There were a lot of guys that Bob Long used to bring in, and then Derrick, took his place in there.
Well, let's really kind of encapsulate like this situation. How big is Canton, Illinois, population-wise, Derrick, roughly?
15,000 people, maybe.
So you got 15,000 people, so it's very rural.
Yeah.
You had yourself who made it to the UFC. You had Phil Johns that made it to the UFC. You had Kenny Robertson that made it to the UFC. Jimmy Bruschetta, who's like Miguel just mentioned, was tough as nails.
Yeah.
You had 15,000 people there, and 3 people made it to the big show. Which I mean, Chris, I think you can agree with that. Most coaches' dream is to get one person to the UFC, and they're from like a large area, populated area, and now you've got Bob Long, who, in my opinion, he's just not as accredited or even well known as he should, because he's dealing with kids from just a nowhere area in regards to population, and turning guys out like yourself, man. It was incredibly impressive with Bob Long.
Yeah, I met Bob in high school. That's who I started training with, and then I joined the military. I was in the military for a while. When I came back, that's when they had kind of transformed, and Phil was kind of fighting in all the original shows there in Illinois and Wisconsin and Iowa and stuff. So I just jumped right in, like right there, 2000 timeframe.
How hard was that room?
Well, I mean, I didn't know anything, so it was real hard at the beginning. I mean, Phil was a national champion Division II wrestler. I didn't wrestle in college or even in high school, so I started learning from like ground zero, basically. So I'm having him as my first coach. My wrestling either had to get really good, really fast, or I was going to get beat up every day. So.
Wow. Well, why don't we take it to your first fight? September 8th, 2000. You fought on the second Silverbacks Classic against Aristides, Britto, who was a pretty seasoned guy at that time, considering it was your first fight.
Yeah.
What can you tell us about it?
I mean, just that fight. That's a fight there's a lot of fights when we probably start going through. I'm gonna be like, I should have won that fight. I dominated the first round, and it was like we went out or went to the corner for the second round, and then it was like everything, like the nerves and everything, and I just like was exhausted. So I came out in the second round, and he ended up getting on top of me, and I just kind of gave him a key lock or something, and that was the end of the fight.
How long had you been training at the time?
2 months.
See, same as
so I got out of the military in like July, so that fight was in September. So
we've talked to a lot of people, and that's kind of like the old school guys. You train for a couple of weeks, like, all right, let's go in there and go at it. And it was always with experienced guys. So a lot of times people from the Midwest especially get like kind of not an upside down record, but kind of at the beginning, it's maybe 500 for the first half, and then all of a sudden they take off. Okay, I get it now. It's hard to fight when you haven't had much experience, and the guys you're fighting have had a lot.
Yeah, that was it. I had no experience, first fight in my hometown area, so I think the nerves got the best of me, in between rounds.
Now, and Britto, like you said, was a guy who was experienced. He doesn't have a great record, but he was kind of like one of those like mean dog kind of guys. Like, was there any like showboating or anything? Like he had a lot of experience on you, or you don't?
I mean, I didn't know him. I didn't know anything about him. So that's just who I was told I was fighting. So
but he was cool. Did you?
Yeah,
see
I didn't. Yeah, I mean,
okay.
I didn't have any issues.
I tell you who else was on that card? Brian Garrity.
Yeah.
Brian.
Did you talk to him at all previously to that?
I didn't know him at that time.
It's kind of
years
strange.
down the road, I ended up training with him quite a bit.
Yeah, that whole Midwest scene eventually kind of came together.
Yeah.
After a couple of years, it was pretty interesting. So you take a loss on your first fight, adrenaline dump. Were you a big ticket seller your first bout?
No, I mean, not really. I wasn't into that. I just was focused on the fight, I guess. I mean, I had some family and stuff, but I wasn't out trying to sell tickets or do all that.
Okay.
Now the main event was Phil.
Yeah, it's Phil Johns. Yeah.
That was your guy. Let me ask you, do you remember any of the rest of the card? Because there's kind of another Midwest legend that appeared on there. It's a guy named Jim Theobald. Is that was that? Do you remember anything?
Yeah, he was a taller guy, heavyweight, right?
Yeah.
Fireman.
Yeah, I don't remember. We had a lot of those events, and I don't remember all the cards. And I know a lot of really good guys over the years fought on our shows, though.
That's for sure.
Clay Guida and Jason Guida fought, Adrian Serrano. Quite a few good guys were on those shows.
I think Bob Long has it all on videotape. I really wish he'd convert it over to YouTube. I really do.
Well, those fights also were all open hand on the ground fights. So
it's like tank race.
They were full stand up. Closed fist, everything was allowed on the feet, but then on the ground, you could only open hand.
And that was kind of to get around the rules and regulations of the state, I believe. Am I correct?
Right.
Did the state even have those regs?
No,
like that?
there was no commission or anybody involved.
Yeah.
I think it was just to avoid problems. It was just
that's the rules they made up.
I
think you might be right on that.
Yeah, the rules kind of kept whatever sort of commission was there away, as long as they weren't, I guess. But yeah,
the rules were very fluid. They changed from fight to fight.
Well, let me give you an example of like fluid rules. So in the second fight that you had, your professional fight, was you had no amateur career, was October 4th, 2000, Silverbacks Classic 3. You lost to Jason Rigsby by heel hook.
Yeah.
Okay. Were your nerves the same at that point, or
that was another? I was winning the fight. When I first started, I was just pure wrestling. Stand up wasn't really there. Had not trained it like with anyone, later on down the road when I was training. So I was strictly going for takedowns, and I took him down and was on top of him and for quite a while, and he got me in a heel hook, and I didn't know what to do, so I tapped.
So the fluid rules were Mike Delaney fought twice that night and it was not a tournament.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I remember him too. Yeah. Ended up training with him a little bit up in Kenosha.
Yeah, I think
another Mike Delaney protege here.
Yeah. Yeah.
No,
So
but
that's kind of the context of Midwest martial arts at that scene. It was just kind of, you know, it was the Wild West, and there was no headbutts. Am I correct?
No.
See,
I don't remember my first. I'm sorry. I don't remember my first fight with the full rules. I know Wisconsin. I ended up fighting up there in Racine, and that was, I think, my first, like, that was everything. Elbows, knees, soccer kicks, like all that stuff.
Okay, so
Strasser,
that was
Dan Hart, I think.
It was Dan Hart,
the good old days,
2001. It was at the Freestyle Combat Challenge, Steve Strasser's event, which was in a boxing ring that had full-on Pride rules, except they also allowed knees to the head on the ground, which Pride did not allow at that time.
Right.
So,
are you sure? Pride didn't allow that?
No, it was like the Mark Coleman rule.
They made it up after the Coleman.
Oh, they must have just got rid of it because they used to be allowed to.
Yeah. They bounced it.
They said this isn't fair. This American's not going to keep winning. We got to make rules for it. Is that what it was?
Yeah, it was like the anti-wrestling rule. Yeah.
Okay. But Derrick, I want to ask you. So the Silverback Classic, that was kind of Phil and Bob's show. So you're kind of at home, then you go. Are you? And you came out of the military. You like martial arts. You came out of the military. You started doing this. Are you thinking this is going to be a career? You're thinking you're already making UFC was in your mind, or where are you?
I wasn't thinking anything about that, but I just like doing it, so I was going to keep doing it.
Couple $100 and
yeah. I mean, I had no intentions. I never got to the point like after the first few fights I wanted to quit. But I wasn't.
A caveat to Dan Hart, who you won by armbar, was that Dan Hart, I think he's Miguel, what's his record? 8-9. It's somewhere around there, 9-10. And
yeah, let me look it up.
Yeah, if you look at it, he's got one more UFC bet than he does win on.
Yeah, he's 9-9.
He's like 9-9, but he fought 10 guys that went to the UFC, and he's got 2 wins over a future friend of yours, Nick Thompson. Like that's not an easy fight.
Yeah, I mean, again, I didn't know him when I fought him, so that was just who I was told I was fighting that night. So
so you just showed up and that was it?
No, I mean, it was a booked fight, but back then there was I couldn't do research. I just had to go off what the promoter, because that was a Strasser show. So you just had to go off hey, this guy's got this many fights and he's fought these guys, and that's basically all you knew.
They're not doing you any favors, really. They're giving you guys with a lot of experience. And do they know this is your third? You're 0-2 right now. Put them in with a guy who's 9-9. Is that what's going on?
Yeah. But I won that fight. It was only like a minute and a half. So
nice. Wow.
Chris, just so you get a little idea, Strasser, kind of a legend in the Midwest, fighter, promoter, and stuff.
Yeah.
I match made with him a little bit, and for the first time that I showed up at their show to match make, joking around during the rule meeting, they actually told the whole crowd in there, they're like, headbutts, you get one. Make
it count.
Good people up there. Yeah.
Better make it a good one.
And then they had a conversation about that headbutts, you have to throw one. It's not like it's optional. You have to throw one. So they were goofing around, but they were good people up there. Derrick, you fell in with those guys because Thompson and those guys later became, kind of the Midwest guys that took care of each other, no?
Yeah, just through things I was doing, I ended up moving up to Chicago, northern Chicago. So I started going up to Kenosha and training up there with Strasser, and that's where I met Thompson and Faircloth and Garrity and all those guys.
Nice. Cool.
So from that fight, you break your losing streak, obviously, which you climb that home, and you get 5 more regional wins, and you win 6 fights out of them. 5 of them are done by way of submission, and some of the wins included, I think you got a split decision win over Ottawa MMA gym owner Jeff Snyder's, who's also kind of a mainstay, here in the Midwest for early mixed martial arts, as well as Alley Cat boxer Mark Long, who's got one of those Travis Fulton type records.
Right. Yeah, I remember that fight.
All right, so you're going through the independent grind. You're going show to show to show. where you wind up at the Iron Heart Crown because you're building a name for yourself when you win 6 fights in a row. People are now starting to put eyes on you, and they put you. I think you're in a main event against Gideon Ray.
That was further down the road. So
right, that's May 18th, 2002. That's Iron Heart Crown number 4.
So I feel like my first kind of what I thought was a big fight was a hook and shoot. My first hook and shoot fight. Ooh. I fought Pat Healy.
Well, that's actually after that.
Is that after?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Well, that's cool.
Doesn't in my mind. It doesn't seem like it's after. I felt like that was like my first big fight.
And here's one of those things. We're all testing each other's memories at this point because we're way back. But that 6-fight winning streak that got you to the Iron Heart Crown that Mike was talking about was Joe Paun was in there. Was that Joe and John? Were they like twin? Was that like the twin brother? They were pretty tough guys. Those guys. Yeah,
I think they were, Illinois State champion wrestlers and
wow,
real good wrestlers.
Well, they were Greco-Roman. They were Greco-Roman, and John Paun was on the Olympic ladder for Greco-Roman wrestling.
Yeah. I think Joe was maybe a little more experienced in the MMA, but that's the names I recognized off of there was the Paun brothers. So
yeah, and I haven't seen the Paun brothers in years. Like fantastic people, like absolutely fantastic people to deal with. So with Gideon Ray,
real quick, Derek. At this point, you said you were mainly wrestling. You're not out wrestling those guys. Was it submission, or were you really starting to pick up the kickboxing at this point? Because I remember you was more of a heavy striker.
Yeah, so I started like you guys were saying with Bob Long and Phil, and along the lines I met Ryan Blackorby, who's a real good Thai boxing coach there in Peoria. So I started traveling between Canton and Peoria, and I started Thai boxing there, and that's where I started kind of developing the stand-up fighting. And over the course of my career, I kind of quit even going for takedowns, and it was like defend takedowns and stand up mostly, as much as I could.
And Blackorby changed your entire style. Like he converted you to a southpaw.
Yeah. Well, no, Phil did that to me because for wrestling, to have that dominant forward foot for wrestling. So that's why I started fighting with my right hand forward.
That's
okay. Yes, I knew you were converted southpaw. You weren't like a true southpaw.
No, I'm right-handed, but I've always thought left-handed.
And that's not an easy thing to do because it's a habit that you got to break.
Right.
So with Gideon Ray, he's fighting out of Keith Hackney's gym, who Miguel, I think we should probably do a deep dive with, early UFC fame. And the promoters were Braulio Carrell and Eric Moon, and Gideon, who was 2-0 at the time. You were 6-2. Gideon later appeared on The Ultimate Fighter as well as the IFL. It was a mainstay in the IFL. Right. So when you fought Gideon, you lost by guillotine in the 3rd round. How did you feel that fight was going at that time?
I think I won the first 2 rounds pretty easily.
He surprised a lot of people.
He was trying to pull himself out of the ring. I would get on top of him, and he was trying to pull himself out of the ring so he could stood up, and I'd take him down again. And it was just like a repeat. And then I don't know, I just lost focus, I guess, in the 3rd round. I went for a takedown, and he got me in a guillotine. So
at that time,
one of those fights I should have won probably. But.
Yeah, at that time, Hackney's gym, he had a lot of really good up and coming talent. I'm not sure what would happen with it, but he had some tough dudes coming out of that gym at that point. And Gideon came in with a lot of hype. I mean, it's his 3rd fight. And did you guys main event that night?
No, I don't think so. I think maybe Stephan Bonner might have fought on that card.
I think you might be right.
It's pretty good.
I got a question for you now. With Phil John's Tough As They Come, that's where you got your wrestling. You mixed it up with a Muay Thai coach, but I'm seeing triangle, choke. Where your submissions coming from?
The couple seminars I took.
Wow.
I mean, no, I didn't train. I did not ever train with a ranked jiu-jitsu black belt until like way further on into my career.
When you got to Chicago, no one in that area, like Shermer or Jeff Curran or.
No, I never trained with those guys. I went straight to Strasser's gym.
Black belt Dave Strasser.
Yeah.
From Chicago?
Yeah.
Would you drive?
Like Mount Prospect area. Yeah.
So you would just drive to Racine from Mount Prospect?
Kenosha, like 4 or 5 days a week. Yeah.
What is that? About an hour and a half? An hour?
There's a little over an hour every day one way.
He drove past like 3 black belts to get there.
But you know what?
I didn't know anyone up there at the time.
And not only that, but I don't care. I'd rather him go to like a true and tried and true tested gym like Dave Strasser over there.
Yeah,
I don't know.
sure.
It's more of a submission style, catch wrestling. I don't know what you would call it, but they're just more fighters. I mean, they're real fighters, not jiu-jitsu guys. So I think I definitely want to go there.
And Dave, I thought, at least when I was training with him, I thought, his jiu-jitsu and ground game and stuff was pretty slick.
Very good.
And
That's
then,
what I mean. They were legit good fighters.
And also, if you go back, I guess, to my original gym with Phil and Bob, we had a guy named Jason Strandberg.
Yes.
Who fought on a lot of the early extreme challenges. And he was like super good jiu-jitsu guy, like self-trained or self-taught or whatever you want to call it. But so I learned a lot from him early on too.
Yeah, Strandberg spent time in the early hook and shoot days.
Yeah,
too.
yeah.
And
I
definitely was a skilled guy.
He was one of those guys that had pre-fight anxiety, so he didn't really perform well on the main stage. But they said, like, in terms of jiu-jitsu and competition, pure jiu-jitsu, they said that guy he turned a lot of heads.
Yeah, he was really good. So I guess that's where a lot of my early on submissions and jiu-jitsu came, along with the wrestling. And Phil, obviously not a jiu-jitsu guy, but did a lot of, training and trying to pick up techniques and stuff. So I think he did a good job of teaching stuff that was based for wrestling, but still submissions.
So, Miguel, when does Derrick come on your radar? Because soon after that, you book him against Pat Healy, March 8, 2003 in Hook and Shoot. How does he come on your radar?
That sounds to me like we'd already had Phil Johns. I knew Bob. Like, Bob is one of the, I've said this before, but I'll say it again. This holds true. And it's one of those things where when you're a matchmaker, every single coach is like, you got to see my next guy. He's the next champion. Every one of them, right? And you can't take every single one of them seriously, or that can't all be right. But some of them, their word has stood up, right? So Pat Healy came from Anthony Hamlet's camp and Matt Hume's camp and stuff out west. So that's his pedigree. And Derrick comes from Phil and the people that I've been using there. So I was just doing pure matchmaking there. 2 guys I didn't know much about, but both being talked up by their camp. And lo and behold, it turned out to be 2 guys that, held up for a real long time in the business.
Well, let's properly frame this. So Derrick is coming in at 6-3, but he had a 6-fight win streak, before dropping his last one. And Pat Healy is 1-3 at the time, except it's like a real deceiving record because 2 of his losses are against Brad Blackburn, and his 3rd loss is against Dennis Kang. So, like, you want to talk about getting thrown in a blender? Like,
Pat, and his gym is the kind of gym that puts you through the grinder before you fight, with Hamlet and Hallman and those guys. And he had a twin brother that they were also pressing. So I also have the feeling that they threw Pat in the fire, kind of protecting Ryan. They're both very talented, and there really was no reason to do that. It may just be my impression, but I got the feeling that they cared more for Ryan than Pat at times.
Really?
Chris, if you look at Pat Healy's record, it is so beat up. Like,
dude, I fought Pat. They threw him in on the WEC last minute on me, and I was like, I didn't think I was gonna have a fight. I was there. And they're like, we got a guy. And I said, he fights at 55 sometimes, but he's fighting at 170 now. I was like, all right. His record was like 11-7 or something. I was like, it's gonna be an easy fight. And then like the day of the fight, I started looking into it, and I started seeing, Dennis. I see all his record. I'm like, Jesus, this guy's fought everybody tough. I mean, this isn't gonna be an easy fight, and he made as hell wasn't.
He made it to the UFC, and his entire career, he was the B-side of a card. Like, he had the hardest road to the UFC that I have ever seen anybody take.
And the dude is tough as nails, man. But I'm sorry for stealing. Derrick, tell us how that fight
Go
went.
ahead, Derrick.
Gosh, yeah, I think that was kind of where I was starting to come into my stand-up. So I think I was hitting him, landing some leg kicks and some strikes and stuff, defending he was trying to take me down basically the whole fight. I think I defended, and then I maybe the second round I caught him in a guillotine choke, finished it.
Yep.
Miguel knows what's coming. Miguel, do you want me to say it, or are you going to say it?
I don't know. I just realized that the main event.
Okay, all right.
Are you going to talk about the main event?
Oh, yes, we are, Miguel. So, Derrick, were you around for the main? Miguel, as soon as I saw your face, I'm like, we read each other's mind. Derrick? I mean, let's just have an open conversation. Never mind your nerves. We can always edit this. Were you there for the main event that night?
I mean, I had to have been. I don't
Okay.
recall what it
So,
was.
that's enough. That's enough. So now, the post-fight main event between Chris Lytle's family and Aaron Riley's family.
That was that
when
night.
they
I
fought.
didn't
Chris,
realize
please stop, Chris. Who do you think won between the two families that fought afterward?
I have no idea. I don't remember that happening, so I don't know.
So that's an Aaron Riley. Maybe I'm taking that as Aaron Riley.
I don't know, maybe, but look, that one's a classic card for as far as I can tell you. That was called Boot Camp. We were resetting after, I think, being sponsored by Dan Lambert for the first time for the previous show, and we wanted to do something good, and this is what we came up with. Phil lost his title on that show to Edson Deniz, I believe.
Okay.
And so that was the co-main event. John Fitch fought on that show.
Yeah, I think we're going to get through this whole card and maybe just get kind of just, a poll of who they thought maybe won the post-fight main event because we constantly bring it up.
And Rob Faircloth was on that card, dearly beloved.
I still got a big old award out in my garage. Boot camp.
Cool.
Big old.
Which one was it? Like the
It's a big black
thing?
like oblong. I know.
Okay,
Whatever.
cool. Yeah,
I got it up there, man.
I think Sprawl sponsored those, the old Sprawl short people.
I can't remember.
Stuff, so it was cool.
So Derrick, Pat Healy,
Yeah.
when you fought him, did you think that he had enough go to get to the UFC?
I mean, at that time, I don't know. Again, I didn't really know him, so.
Yeah, but you fought him. I mean, after the fight.
I mean, I didn't think I did at that time, so I don't know.
Yeah.
So I mean, I didn't think of myself as being at that level at that point in time at all. So.
And McKee just beat a guy who's now 1-4. I bet he thought, no, this guy's that. I mean, I mean, he's tough though. I mean, geez.
Fought Masvidal, fought Khabib, fought Gleason Tebow. I mean, the guy's literally fought everybody.
I felt bad. He beats Jim Miller and submits him, gets 5 tonight and 7 tonight, and then loses it for tested positive for marijuana. Lost like 120 grand in bonus money or something.
Yeah, marijuana's
the performance enhancing drug it is.
Yeah, that's crazy. Crazy.
I felt horrible for him.
Derrick, once again, I mean, I'm just gonna need you to just be real honest here. How was it dealing with Jeff Osborne and Miguel? Did you get your pay? Everything was okay? Your hotel? What about food per diem?
At that time, I probably spoke 0 words to either of them. I think Bob probably did, and Phil.
Was it because they were rude to you? It's because they were just very.
I was like the new guy. I was the new guy, so I just showed up and fought. I didn't.
I want to make sure. Just want to make sure. Your money was okay. No issues.
I mean, I think I got a couple $100 maybe.
But no, I'll tell you, that's one of the things I liked about Bob Long was that, that me and Bob could talk and the word was the word. And then, later we could sign contracts and stuff like that. But we never had, Bob was one of those guys, I think, that understood me. And when we, made a deal, we had a deal. And Derrick was in my clutches there for a bit too, because Healy, and then, like I said, Lambert had probably sponsored the show. So his next fight was in Florida against one of Dan's guys, a black belt named Wald Blois. So
that fight took place May 24th, 2003 at AFC, which Miguel, obviously you were matchmaking that. Wald Blois. So was this your first plane ticket? to a fight, Derrick?
Yeah, I believe so. Because the hook and shoot was like my longest drive, I think, to a fight. Because I think Evansville was probably like 6 hours, maybe 5 or 6 hours. So, from where I lived. So yeah, pretty sure that was my first flight. So I was starting to get big time.
Now, before Mike gets too cute here, now this wasn't one of those deals where like you got to fight Wald and I'll pay you for Wald and Healy. Everything was square already.
No, yeah, it was fun.
Okay, good.
So it wasn't like a credit system, like I'll
I got
pay
a
you
plane
for hook and shoot,
ticket,
but you gotta get your way to
room.
Florida.
Yeah, no, everything was good.
Papa Dan.
That's good. So with Wald Blois, obviously it's your first plane ride. Was there some additional nerves because of that? Because that is a big benchmark when kind of coming to, getting to that next level.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think that it feels like it's a step up. You're flying in somewhere, first time fighting, not out of state, but out of the Midwest, I guess. And then, the level of guys on the show were really good too. So,
well, do you remember who your corner was? Do you remember who your
so,
corner was then? Who did you bring in with you? Who you trained with all the
Bob,
time?
I probably brought, at this point, I was still with Bob and Phil.
Okay.
Yeah.
George Masvidal made his debut on that show.
And like, let's look at some of the matchmaking by yourself, Miguel. You had Jens Pulver versus Jason Maxwell, which was a huge upset because, Jens was arguably, was it before or after Sam Morgan when Jens lost those 2 in a row after leaving the UFC? Miguel.
I think Pulver was supposed. Maxwell was supposed to clean up after that loss. He took a second loss in a row.
He took a second loss, and Pulver was just on fire. He hit 2 speed bumps right in a row, which was absolutely shocking, especially to people that he should have beat. And also, Tara LaRosa fought Jennifer Howe, which Jennifer at that time, you could argue, was probably one of the best in the world.
Man.
Yeah, no, Derrick, I want to ask you, a lot of the other Midwest guys talk about it. Now this is one of those things where you, like you said, first plane ticket, but you are Midwest guys from hook and shoot. Now we're going to Florida and it is the budding ATT team. And was there an us versus them mentality that you made friends with the Midwest? Like, what was that? Talk about that camaraderie, because other guys have hit on it before.
Yeah, I mean, if I can remember correctly, again, I wasn't really great friends with anyone outside of my gym at this point. I knew guys from the shows, like the Silverback shows and, the Midwest. But the ATT guys were obviously like completely separated, like, together. So
yeah, they were like tracksuits and stuff.
Right. So yeah, I think just naturally, we started mingling together at those events and, helping each other out. And I think there was probably a lot of corner swapping and guys helping in the corners and stuff like that.
Yeah, Dan's about as fair as they come, but I'll tell one quick Dan story just so that you get that feel. This is the way it was. So Derrick, he may get $50 a day to eat, right? So Derrick, he's at the restaurant, he's checking up his stuff. The ATT guys are over there and they don't get $50. They just put it on the bill. And they would eat and go home with 2 other meals to eat in the hotel room and stuff, because that's how they rolled. So it wasn't quite, totally a even playing field.
Let me kind of set the table a little bit. The American top team was kind of like, all right, you've got a neighborhood softball tournament, and they start bringing in guys from all over the world to win like a local tournaments, because that's kind of like ATT was just. They were just stacking the deck, and the people that were lucky enough to get brought over, they just, like Miguel said, they had kind of endless money to spend on things to train, eat. It was definitely a change of life for a lot of people.
But the matchmaking, Dan, we were very fair. Like I said, hey, Derrick caught Wald. That's not the way that one was supposed to go if it was, Dan writing the script.
Well, here,
the story about that, I don't think he liked me too much after that fight, because back then my weight cutting was real primitive. So I was turn the shower on real hot in the bathroom at the hotel and trying to create my own sauna and like jogging in place in a suit or whatever. And I had so much steam built up in the room that I was tired. I went to put my hand on the wall to like rest, and my hand went through the wall. I like softened the plaster so much.
Oh my God.
So that fight, I knocked him out. I broke my hand that fight. And when I went back to get my check, Dan had made a comment. He's like, "Oh, did you break it in the fight or when you punched the wall in the hotel room?" And I was like, I didn't punch the wall in the hotel room. My hand went through it because I was cutting weight in the bathroom. He seemed like, he was probably mad that I beat his guy, but then
to put a little asterisk on that, it's not like Dan got the bill from the hotel.
He knew about it,
because it's Dan's hotel.
Right. It was his hotel.
That's the way it was. It's just,
Right.
okay. It's a little different. It's not like this is going on your credit card. This is on my card. No. It was like, hey, boss, the wall's fucked up. But no. Now the truth is out. You were doing your job.
Yeah.
Hey, just tell him next time put me in a hotel with the sign and this won't happen.
Yeah, it's your fault.
Yeah, there were no amenities. I don't remember any amenities at that hotel.
So Wald was 3-1, obviously with the American Top Team. You were 9-3. You get out in the first round with a knockout. Obviously, the nerves of getting on an airplane didn't affect you at all. And 12 fights go by, and you're 11-1 in your last 12 fights. Where Miguel, September 5th, 2003. Did you match make him against Jorge Santiago?
Yeah.
Wow. How does that fight come about?
It's the at that point, Derrick's been with the rotation a little bit, and you do what you can. I think the trips to Florida were a little bit of an incentive, and I think Derrick was a typical Midwest guy too, and that he wasn't going to be shy about like, oh, it's George Santiago, so it's a guy who's a little better than Wald Blois. I think that's probably how he looked at it, and that makes it kind of easy, Santiago was tough. I'm not sure if he had already fought Wisniewski or not, but my 170-pound guys were fair game against their 170-pound guys, and that's what you're seeing here is some of that mix.
Yeah. So why is it only a 2-round fight, Miguel?
I don't know if we were with Shudo at that point or if we were trying some Shudo stuff, and that might have been a B-class Shudo match according to the way they rated it. If not, it may have been something with the boxing commission, but I don't recall exactly.
Derrick, do you remember?
No, I don't. I don't remember. Or a lot of those AFC fights were 2-rounders, weren't they? The only I only remember being affiliated with a lot of fights. Shudo was when I think wasn't the Ironheart Crown doing actual Shudo sanctioned fights.
Yep, they did too. We did at Hook and Shoot for a little bit. Now I'm not sure of the timing there, but it could have been that. Chris, you were on this show. You fought Chat Lavender.
Yeah, it's a good card, man. I mean, geez, going down there, you knew a lot of American Top Team guys were going to be on the card. You know what I mean? So I was pretty happy not to have to fight one of them.
Yeah, Nick Aguilar. So yeah, it was a fun.
Yeah, Jorge Santiago's 3-1. Obviously, stellar career. He is now. He went to the Blackzilians. I think is he with Blackhouse now? Santiago.
I'm not sure, but he's about 8 years since his last fight. So
amazing trainer.
I think he's more in the training department now.
Yeah, no, he's a head trainer. Yeah, he's a head trainer now. So he's 3-1. You're 10-3 at the time. It's a 2-round fight. You drop the decision.
Right.
Where were you at mentally after that bout?
That was a frustrating fight. I don't remember it being very eventful. I think he just kind of got position on me on top, and I don't remember being hurt or anything. He just was on top more over the 2 rounds. It was about it.
He's Kamaru Usman's main trainer, by the way.
Right.
So I mean, he's a talented guy.
And as I mentioned, I got him with Wisniewski at AFC 6. So,
okay.
He was tasting my best 170 pounds at that point.
Yeah. So October 3rd, 2003, you fight for one of my favorite promoters, Randy Greenman, in the legendary show Reality Shoot Fighting against Chris Lytle.
Randy Greenman, that was my second or third Randy Greenman fight. And yeah, Randy's a good guy, but
so yeah, I remember that fight. That, to me, that fight, I felt going into that fight that I was not going to win that fight. I did not have confidence because at that point Chris was way more experienced than I was, and I took the fight because of, hey, I'm going to fight whoever I get offered to fight. But yeah, so I probably didn't go into that fight with a lot of confidence that I could win. But
do you think Chris cheated at all?
I don't remember him cheating.
I'll be honest. I remember when I was fighting. I remember thinking how strong and good a striker you were, and like you were a powerful striker. And I was pride myself in being I wanted to keep it on my feet, but I didn't keep it on my feet during that fight. I don't think. I don't remember if you tried to take me down or if I tried to take you. I remember how it went down.
I remember the first round. I was just trying to defend you on top of me the entire first round.
Yeah.
And then I think the second round, I got a takedown on you. And then you reversed it from the guard. And then I tried to get out and you got my back.
Okay. I remember the first one. I remember you throwing some kicks. And I remember thinking, I don't like that very much because you had powerful kicks. And usually in a fight like that, I usually just want to stand up and throw punches. But I remember, for some reason, I don't remember if I initiated more takedowns or you did. But I just remember I wasn't upset that it was a ground fight. So
it went to the ground unusually fast for two guys
for me.
that are known as, for their striking, for sure.
Yeah.
So, Derrick, what was your experience with the promoter, Randy Greenman?
I mean, again, it's like, back then I just wasn't that outgoing, I guess. So I didn't spend a lot of time talking to the promoters or whoever my manager was, did most of that. So, everything was good. I mean,
Did you think that one day the Hells Angels bikers would be dragging him from his house and putting his body in different parts of rural areas?
But did he owe money or something? I don't know the history.
It's a fascinating story. Chris, if you don't mind if I indulge in this. So Randy was a bar owner, and one of the Hells Angels was moving a lot of cocaine. And in essence, what takes place is the Hells Angel guy goes to jail, doesn't tell anybody, says, Randy, here's my business. I'll be back. When I do, just give me my business back. So the guy's gone, we'll call it 6 or 7 years. And in that time, Randy expands the business like quite a bit. And he starts like kind of changing his source to getting it from Costa Rica. And when this guy gets out of jail, he wants his business back. The guy goes, all right, you give me the business. And it's like, this big. And, now I got it that big. We're going to have to try to work this out. And the guy goes, oh, no. I'm taking, the entire franchise. And he had a disagreement, and Randy wound up in several places.
Yeah. At the same time.
Yes. Yeah. Chris, do you remember that? Like, he was essentially, what he was doing was he'd have these amazing events and he'd wash. He was a huge highest stand guy. Loved catch wrestling, and he would wash his drug money through these events. And he had Sean Shirk Parisian 1 and 2. He had Chris Lido versus Pete Spratt. He had Monville Gambarian on there. He had some big names. Chris, what do you recall about that event?
I do remember there being like a biker presence there. And I just kind of thought that was what kind of guy he was. I was just said, okay, whatever. I noticed there was biker, but I just thought, hey, maybe that's how they're getting a lot of those people enjoy it here and they're part of the crowd. I didn't really think too much about it until later on. That's like, okay, that makes sense. I mean, you should have known something when you were getting paid more than most fights. You know what I mean? There's always something behind it.
Middle of nowhere. It was like Belleville, Illinois. And then
where there was Bellevue. Is that where that was at?
Yeah, it was Bellevue, Illinois. Yeah.
Well, the biker presence was all over the place. And I'm not just saying illegal, but they supported the fights. Like, like Strasser had a biker presence that came to the shows to watch the fights and stuff.
Yeah.
Some fighters fought, I associate that Illinois area with biker area, but you can go up further. they're all over Canada as far as like backup, I'm sorry, big time fight fans and stuff. So, aside from that, I didn't see any books.
Randy had an amazing personality, bigger than life, like gave everybody his time. He was probably about 500 pounds. He was like this huge dude. And then he had this beautiful woman that was his girlfriend that had like novelty section sized boobs. And it was like, I've never seen boobs that big, like on such a small body. I'm sure they were natural, but everything was kind of big with Randy. He had, tons of money that he was throwing around, overpaying fighters, bringing in guys from California, fantastic fights. And it was, man, I miss him. Honestly, man, he was a great dude, real good guy.
I think that was my only fight I ever fought for him.
Phil fought a couple. He fought Steve Berger after that for him. And a young Parisian was there. He was there in the audience. It was cool. It was really cool. So October 3rd, 2003. Go ahead, Miguel.
Yeah, I just want to mention Lytle fought Strasser there too.
True. Yeah. I fought for him like 3 times. Yeah.
Yeah. Great guy, man. Great guy. So October 3rd, 2003, you lose to Chris via rear naked choke. And then you go on and fight future UFC veteran Joey Gilbert at the Ironheart Crown, November 22nd, 2003. With this, in my opinion, why don't you walk us through it? But everybody was kind of like, oh my God, Derrick Noble is legit.
Yeah, it was another fight of me just defending takedowns the whole fight. I think he took me down. I mean, he's a really good wrestler. So he took me down, but actually I was beating him up, I think, more off my back than he was on top of me. I think it might have been the second round. I defended one of his takedowns. I think he was starting to get a little gassed from trying to take me down. And he ducked his head and I kicked him in the head, dropped him, and then I hit him pretty good while I was on the ground. And it was the end of the fight.
Yeah.
What was that weight at? What was the weight?
So that was the Shudo, like 167.5, I think, was that Shudo weight class.
Okay, so he was fighting big though for Joey.
Yeah, because he was. Well, so I was supposed to fight his brother,
Danny Gilbert.
And so he pulled out like a few days before or something. So he stepped.
Yeah, that's the thing about the Gilberts. If one of them pulled out, the other one stepped up. So you knew they weren't lying. It wasn't like they left the promoter high and dry. They were always good like that. So that was Joey's actual last fight. He never fought after that. And let's look at his ADCC vet, UFC vet. I know you're coming off, a loss to Chris. But at the end of the day, that's a huge win for yourself. Like you defended a takedown against a guy that's four-time state champion wrestler, and you ended it like with highlight real fashion. I remember being at that bout.
Yeah, it was obviously it was a good win. So.
And now at this point, you're clearly, like I said, when I went to UT, I remember feeling how good your kickboxing and power was. Do you feel like you're transitioning now, like at this point, fully to being more of a stand-up guy?
Yeah, I mean, that's at this point on my game plan in fights is, unless something goes wrong, is to defend takedowns and keep it on the feet.
Yeah,
pretty much.
Okay, that makes sense.
And you hit a real good chin too. It's not like you were one of those guys that was a really good hammer and kind of a so-so nail. Like you took heavy punches and you withstood them.
Yeah, I think I think I only got TKO'd maybe 3 or 4 times my entire career.
All right, but that was more towards the end as well.
Well, yeah, it was scattered in, a few, but all against Eddie Alvarez, Yves Edwards. So pretty good guys.
I've heard of those guys.
Yeah. So Miguel,
people that I'm not ashamed of that,
Yeah.
So Miguel, that was a Shudo event, and it was headlined by Miguel Torres versus Ryan Ackerman. And Miguel Torres' like 32 fight win streak got snapped that night. It was kind of like a historic night to be there. I was front and center watching, like eating it all up. It was a fantastic night.
I remember watching that fight. That was a good fight.
I thought the rules were kind of floating. Like, for instance, Shudo has a catch rule. So whenever you get close to submission, the referee would, throw up a C, and then it would be like a 10-9 round for the other guy. Or if the guy won the round and got the catch, it'd be a 10-8 round. Miguel Torres should have had 5 or 6 catches in it because he almost had Ryan, and the referee just wasn't calling it. It was, I don't know, it became the rules were like fluid, how we had described, and it was kind of hard to keep up, especially the people judge or reffing. Not a lot of classes. It is what it is. It's what it is. From there, Miguel, you bring him down to fight Thiago Alves at the AFC, December 6, 2003. What was the reasoning behind making that fight?
Well, again, the trip to Florida, I don't know what he was making at this point, but I'm hoping it was more than $500, right? I think you probably had gotten into the $1,000 territory and stuff like that. And I couldn't afford to do that type of payday in Indiana, really. So I'm bringing along my guys as best I could. He had just come off a loss against an ATT guy on our show. So here he gets another ATT guy, kind of let him.
Well, it's his third ATT guy. Derrick, did you feel like you were being targeted by that gym?
I don't know. I mean, I didn't think of it that way at the time. So,
well, do you guys?
I figured it was their show, or that they're trying to highlight their fighters. So yeah, bringing in guys. So that was expected.
But how does that make you feel? Like, was that like a little bit of a challenge for you, or were you just, because it's like, I see it this way. It's like, man, if you fought 2 of his teammates, that's something. That's something that they got to be, unless they're monkeys, I mean, it's like, and they're pros. So you're going in, I don't want to say with a disadvantage, but you got to change your game. You got to take all that into account. Yeah.
Again, I mean, it's a long time ago, so I can't kind of remember everything I was thinking back then, but I just took the fight, I guess. I don't know how to,
let me kind of help paint the picture for you. So, like you said, in Lambert, he's got all these ringers on the local, softball team, bringing them in. Thiago Alves absolutely falls into that category. He came in with, he kind of got the red carpet treatment when he went over there. He was one of their prized possessions. Like, we got Alves. So they announce him as if it's his second pro fight, but when you look at his record, it's obviously not true. He's had more than that. And what I saw in that fight from yourself, Derrick, was Thiago tagged you a couple times where it looked like you were dazed, and rather than kind of, wilt, you pushed, like you upped your game. Like you kind of saw yourself leveling up. Like, in my opinion, in terms of like your pro career, if you had to pinpoint a moment where you kind of leveled up, this is definitely that fight. Thiago Alves, obviously ATT ringer, as we had said, and you win in the second round by rear naked choke. Lots of clinching, an exchange where you may have been in trouble, and then you were like a machine just plowing right through him, man.
Yeah, I mean, I was in a few bad spots in that fight and was able to fight my way out of them. Maybe, like you said, probably better than I had done early on in my career. So
how do you feel your stand-up matched up? Because he's ATT and this, that, but he was predominantly a stand-up guy.
Yeah.
How was that?
I don't recall either of us really hitting each other or hurting each other on the feet. It was almost like as soon as we started throwing strikes, we were immediately in a clinch. So, and then kind of fighting the underhooks and that kind of thing. So,
well, here, the real, like the interesting thing for myself is, what was the conversation like with Thiago or his camp after that bout? Because he refused the hand raising ceremony.
Yeah, I didn't talk to him. I always thought like Laborio was always the nicest guy, I think, there, with the ATT guys. He was always real friendly and would talk. And whereas at that point in time, a lot of them I thought were real standoffish. If you weren't in their crew, they didn't really talk to you a whole lot.
Hey, Chris, what's your take? Chris, what's your take on that when somebody refuses to stand next to the person as the other guy gets their hand raised?
Oh, I love it. It makes me happy when I'm the guy winning. I'm like, you little bitch, go ahead. I mean, yeah, I won. So I get it. Go back and cry. I love it. It makes me happy. But yeah, it's obviously a little sore loser. Obviously, I mean, I think he was a pretty young guy though, and You know, he's being brought in. He's believing the hype, how great he is. I'm going to come in here and beat my last teammate beat this guy. I'm going to beat this guy. And so I'm sure he probably felt shame and embarrassment. There's probably a lot of different emotions going on as a young person. I get it a little bit, but I mean, that's a good thing about being like a lifelong wrestler. You learn to win and lose. I mean, if you don't learn that lesson quick, it's going to be a tough life for you. So in wrestling, you're going to lose some. You learn how to do it and win graciously. And if you haven't done it many times fighting, it's going to be rough.
Well, Chris, you had mentioned like when you went to Pancrase and you had beat a guy and you watched him backstage just crying uncontrollably because he's living in their house, he's on their payroll, they're feeding him. Yeah. Thiago Alves kind of falls into that category at this point in his career as well.
Absolutely. You know what I mean?
Like
so
there's some embarrassment there because
his world might be falling apart. You know?
Yeah.
Like, what am I going to do next? I don't have a job now. So it's a little different. Like that, I was ever in that situation. I don't think Derrick was either. So you kind of got to, I mean, what would I do in that situation? Would I do that? I don't think so, but I don't really know.
You know, he's got to be thinking, man, I might be leaving in the morning.
He bounced back all right, though.
Oh, yeah, for sure. So, Miguel, Derrick's on your radar. Well, I might also add your future manager, Pat O'Malley, fights Chainsaw Charles McCarthy on that card. And Pat, one of my all-time favorite people to deal with in MMA ever, I might add. So, Miguel, Derrick's on your radar. He is on your radar. And at this time, you start the MFC Euphoria series. And March 13, 2004, you bring him up in against Musail Aludinov. Am I even close, Miguel?
Musail Aludinov, yeah.
No, not really. Okay.
Close.
So, Derrick, was this the first time you ever fought a Russian money collector that was later murdered?
Yes.
That's the real question. I mean, the guy
several
died
times.
just soon after this from collecting money. I mean, is this
Really?
your first instance?
That's it. That was my first time in.
Oh, okay. That's also a good benchmark. It's also
was
good.
It in Russia?
Yeah. So he fought for a promoter that was murdered, and now a Russian money collector that was also killed. I might add.
Derrick's like the Clintons. You just get around and people start dying, man.
Yeah.
You know, this is
I think we should look at the rest
City.
of his record. You know, just kind of go with the noble body count. So walk us through that fight, Derrick.
That fight, geez. It's a lot of feeling out, I think. Like the striking mostly was at a distance. I was landing a lot of kicks. I think I took him down a few times. You know, I think I was winning all the exchanges and the grappling exchanges. I won a decision, I think, in that fight. So I think it was, it was like I believe it was probably a 30-27.
It was at the Trump Taj Mahal. Was the Donald?
It was, yeah. So
Was
that
he
was
really?
exciting. My first and only fight at the Trump Taj Mahal.
Huh. That's wild. How was
that was a big show too. I mean, that was like for me, that was probably at that time the biggest event I'd been on, obviously. So just with the production and the crowd and the location and everything. So
that was
Miguel,
because of the USA versus Russia feel, the Red Devil team came, like you mentioned earlier, like that feel of like they all were in uniform and you run into them and they're all together and stuff. And like the American team came together. I remember it as a real fun night. Looking at it now, kind of, one of those odd things. 3 fighters that have passed away were on that card. Musail, and then Faircloth and Ron Faircloth and Justin Islands. So kind of a little bit of a star-crossed card.
Derrick, we didn't know about all 3 of those.
Where were you that night? Got an alibi?
Well, let's talk about some of the surprising things. So you go to a decision with him. What shocked me the most when looking at this on your record was Keith Wisniewski knocked him out afterward, like when they fought after, and you definitely had a harder punch than Keith.
Yeah. I guess I didn't land it that night.
Yeah. So Miguel, as a matchmaker, this Euphoria MFC show is largely backed by Russian money. Am I correct when I say that?
Yeah, the Euphoria promotion was Vlad Lavrinovich was the promoter that I worked for as a matchmaker. So yeah.
Okay. So how difficult was it for you as an American matchmaking these Russians with, I don't think many Russians won that night. Am I correct?
No, none. I think 1 or 2 won. They went 2-8 or something like that.
Okay.
Ooh.
So was it uncomfortable for you? I mean, would they say, we'll meet with you tomorrow, but it's going to be in Russia, even though we're here?
The one-way ticket. No, you know, I think it was a good lesson for them, you know, in the time frame. Now you look at Russian fighters, and a lot of Russian fighters are dominating at the highest level. And you always knew that they had that potential. But for what you said, like you said, a lot of these guys were debt collectors. A lot of them had, you know, maybe a little bit of a criminal background more than just a straight martial arts background. Now they mix it up more and you get wrestler guys. But back then, Russian wrestlers were Russian wrestlers. So I think the guys here learned that you really do have to take it seriously in a full training level, and that you can't count on X factors like, yeah, it's a Russian promotion, we're all going to get easy fights. It didn't turn out to be the case. Yeah, did I have some explaining to do? You know, I told them, it's like, you know, you kind of got to learn the complete game, and I'm still here. So, you know.
That card had a lot of really good guys on it too, if I remember.
Yeah. I mean,
Cal Sonnen fought, Trevor Prangley, I think.
Yep. Clementi, Rich Clementi, Ebersol, who we've interviewed on here, former Chris Lytle opponent, Chat Lavender, was on that show. So definitely, it was one of my better shows that I'm most proud of there.
No, you definitely did a good job.
I'll tell you a very interesting story. Vlad lived in New Jersey, you know, from St. Petersburg, but he lived in New Jersey. And here we're starting to deal with the Red Devil team and what was Fedor's management and stuff like that. And I told him, I was like, look, you're more westernized. Why don't you like kind of join forces with him? And instead of playing this game of like, you know, who's got the bigger promotion and stuff like that, why don't you guys work together and join forces? And he said, no, I understand what you're saying as a Westerner, but I can't do that. I can't do that. and Vlad and Vadim always were sort of rivals, like gentlemen, like, you know, eyeing each other that, you know, might one day duel, but never did, you know, but they would never work together. And that was sort of frustrating to me. That's eventually, when I signed Fedor, it was because of Vlad's participation in the deal. It made it very much easier. But, you know, you did have to understand their culture, and there's certain things that were important to them.
Well,
you know.
let's look at Derrick's last 12 months. He's got Pat Healy, Wald Blois, Jorge Santiago, Chris Lytle, Joey Gilbert, Thiago Yves, Musail Aladinov. That's all within 1 year.
It's a tough year, man.
How banged up were you, Derrick?
I mean, it's just I don't think a lot about that stuff, so it's just I get offered fights and I was taking them. So you know, I don't remember.
Were you working full time at this point?
Going into fights hurt or not prepared or anything. So I guess with all those fights, looking back on it, you know, it's fairly unscathed. I didn't get hurt really or knocked out or so.
How about broken hand? Never.
Well, that was the Blois fight, and I think I had a couple 3 or 4 months that I didn't fight after that. So
yeah, wow. So there would have been even more people on there had you not broken your hand. Wow. So were you working full time or were you fighting full time?
I think I was going to college at that time. So going to college and training.
Okay. So at this point,
do you remember what you made for that fight in New Jersey?
I don't remember at all.
Okay. Could be. I'm guessing 2 and 2, maybe $4,000.
I don't think it's that much.
All right. Yeah.
I mean, you said you didn't remember, Miguel. I mean, don't think that many. Make it believable.
Maybe it was 39. I think it was $39.50.
maybe like one and 500 to win.
It's like 15,000 and 28,000 or something.
Oh God, Derrick,
$1 million.
I hope it gets better later here. Please tell me.
So, Chris, at this point, I mean, I think you're in a WEC at this point, and regionally speaking, the 170-pound weight class had like Josh Neer, had Nick Thompson, Derrick Noble, Keith Wisniewski, and it was kind of coming down to like a final four. And on November 20th, 2004, the Ironheart Crown 8, you end up fighting Keith Wisniewski in the main event. I'm going to be honest with you, that was one of those fights. I was there, but I couldn't watch it because I really like both of you guys a lot. It was very difficult for me to watch. How does that fight come about? Do you recall? Were you a part of that, or just kind of acquiesced to Bob Long again?
Well, I think Pat was kind of doing things for me at that point in time.
Pat O'Malley.
Yeah, because at that time, I would have been training up there with Strasser and those guys, I believe. What'd you say that was, 04?
Yeah, it was November of 04.
Yeah, so I was training in Wisconsin. So,
but obviously, you know, Keith.
So I had Strasser. I think I had Strasser and Garrity in my corner for that fight.
All right, so this is like the interesting part. You guys were the main event, put on a great show. You lost the decision. You connected at the end of the second round and almost knocked Keith out.
Yeah,
and I think it was.
I think he had, if I remember, he had just had a real tough fight before he fought me. Maybe with Steve Berger. Did he have like a kind of a knockdown drag out with Berger at one point?
He did. Yeah.
And I think it was maybe only like a month or two before we fought. Because I remember
it might have been within a few weeks.
Yeah.
Because
he wasn't, if I remember the fight, he was trying to clinch and get takedowns most of the fight. He wasn't trying to do a whole lot of stand-up that I remember. So, that fight, I think I lost the decision on, based on position. He was on top of me more, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He kept getting you with the upper body clinch, taking you down.
Yeah.
You guys were the main event on the undercard. Thiago Alves knocks out Jason Chambers, and JZ Calvin knocked out Bart Pelazewski. So did you run into Thiago there? Did you guys have a conversation, shake hands?
No, I don't remember. Not really. I don't think. I want to say he didn't speak that good of English when he first came over. So
he didn't speak any. He didn't speak any English, and
that's true.
And I don't speak any Portuguese, so
hard to have a good conversation.
Yeah. For the record, Wisniewski fought Berger 5 weeks before your fight.
Was it 5 weeks?
I think he did say he kind of had a broken nose heading in there, and so not a great idea to go in with a puncher like Derrick and a broken nose, but
plenty of time resting back then.
A little caveat, and Chris, when you and I talked to Conan Silveira when we did our interview, this is the event where Liborio and Carlson Sr.
got into it.
Just this blow up war, and the thing about Senior, what I really liked about him was he read the playing field. Like Liborio, he's chewing out. Conan Silveira is American top team. And because of the relationship that Conan had growing up with Carlson Sr., Carlson knew that, all right, you got this big heavyweight here. I'm an older guy. You're an older guy. But I'm going to talk to you any way I want. And you're not going to do anything about it because he can't, because of our relationship that we had when he was a child. Carlson Sr., man, it was like, I remember watching it just going, wow. I'm like, I can't believe he's going in on Liborio like this when, you had Carlos Diaz there, Carlo Diaz, who's the head ADCC ref. You had Conan Silveira, and then it was just Carlson Sr. alone. That was interesting. Yeah, it was interesting. All right, so Derrick, February 5th, 2005, you fight for Bob Long, the Combat Doe Fighting Challenge. You have a draw against Romez Brower. This is one of those fights where I'm thinking, it could have been.
Yeah. Based on who I'd been fighting and what I've been doing, I don't know how I ended up with a draw on that fight.
So at the time, Romez Brower moved into Bob Shermer's gym. I think he was from out of state, like North Carolina, South Carolina. Moves into the basement of his gym, and I think he kind of got gifted a draw.
Yeah, that fight, I don't remember that fight that well, so I'd have to try to track down some VHS tape on that one.
Do you remember if you felt like you won the fight or not?
I believe I thought I won the fight. think there were a couple times he like jumped out of the ring, if I remember.
Yeah.
So I was getting frustrated, I think, with that.
And Nick Thompson fought Brian Gassaway on that card.
Oh yeah, that's right. He did well, I think, in that fight.
Yeah, he won.
Yeah.
He won. Shoney Carter was in his corner. And if you recall, he would say, "This is Shoney Carter. Do this, Brian Gassaway."
That's right. Yeah.
He was doing that stuff.
You know, for Romez Brower, just, you know, one of those asterisks. I didn't remember him, but check this out. So, first fight, Gideon Ray. Second fight, Forrest Petz. Third fight, Derrick Noble. Fourth fight, Ed Herman. What? It's a pretty tough day, man.
Yeah.
So,
He was tough. No, Romez Brower first was legit tough. Didn't have much ground, which is why I moved in with Bob Shermer. I don't know how Bob found him. But I mean, he was in shape. He could hit, man. Yeah, he was legit.
I think I got that fight back a couple of years later, I believe.
You did.
Yeah.
Yes, you did. And I think that was a favor from Dan Lambert. We'll get into that once we get there. But right now, you fight for Extreme Cage Combat in Des Moines against Josh Neer.
Yeah.
It's two stand-up fighters. How does that fight go down? I'd love to see it.
So that's one of those fights that, you know, I should have done better in that fight. I dropped him. So I think I landed a head kick on him, and then I hit him and he went down, and I followed him down to the ground and ground and pound a little bit, and he caught me in a triangle choke. You know,
So Jeff Paul and Nip Gamps were the promoters. I believe maybe both had passed Nick about a year ago, and we surprised at his ground game. Both you guys are known for your stand-up, and
yeah, I mean, if I remember it, it did surprise me, because I thought once I got on top of him that, you know, I would be able to control him, and, you know, he wasn't out like where I thought I was going to finish the fight, but I thought I would finish the round out, try to beat him up as much as I could, and yeah, he caught me. So,
okay. So looking back on Keith Wisniewski's UFC debut against Josh Neer, were you a little surprised at that outcome?
I don't remember what it was.
Josh thoroughly for Keith. I think Keith was on the receiving end of about 40 stitches. And
okay.
yeah, I was shocked.
Yeah. But Neer's tough. So, I mean,
I didn't think he was going to. I thought it'd be a lot closer. Yeah, I mean, he really pulled away. After that, you jump back on the Euphoria card with Miguel, March 4, 2006. Miguel, what puts Carlo Prater in the same ring with Derrick Noble?
well, you know, at this point, I've been doing this for a few years now, right? What are we talking about? 2006. So it's like and Derrick's, you know, we've gone through a half a dozen fights of Derrick's. You know, we talked about George Masvidal debuting. He was sticking around. Wisniewski stuck around. Chris was, you know, already had pancreas. I would have loved to have tied up Chris for a long time, and we've actually did talk about it, but it never really happened. But I like to have my guys along, and Carlo was an Yves Edwards guy. Yves had this guy that he kept telling me was great, and, you know, Prater turned into another one. Just, you know, if you did a 4-man with, like, you know, pick them, Wisniewski, Derrick, Berger, Prater, and stuff like that, man, a round robin, everybody could wind up 2-2. You know what I mean? It's like that strong of a tournament. And I think that's what Prater was at that point, a little Texas representation.
Were you surprised going into that fight in regards to how well you did, Derrick?
Yeah, because I knew a little bit about him. And that was another fight. That was just I guess I just was on that night, because I don't recall him ever really doing much of anything to me. He was trying to take me down, and I defended all of his takedowns. I would end up on top of him. I think I hit him with quite a few good shots standing up. I think it was like a pretty clear-cut, unanimous decision. When he was tough, though, I remember hitting him quite a bit with some good shots, and, you know, he stayed in there.
Yeah, flashy. And Yves Edwards, obviously, in his corner that evening.
I think he had Dennis Kang in his corner also.
Was it Kang? Okay.
So, yeah.
After that,
that's the fight. I think his dad was there with him.
It was. You know what? It was. There was.
There you go, Derek. The memory's
Yeah,
kicking
man.
in, man. No problem, bro.
Coming back. It's coming back. Yeah, it was his dad, and Dennis Kang, I think, wasn't there with him, but it was in the corner with him. Because I remember Kang came up in the locker room afterwards and was like, he's like, I'm surprised he hung in there because you were hitting him with some good shots, you know?
So yeah, Yves had spent a little bit of, he was he'd spent time and actually I think flew the ATT flag for a little bit, had a relationship there. So I'm not surprised Kang would have cornered him if they showed up at the same show.
Right.
So Derrick, your UFC 59 debut, April 15, 2006, that was a last minute thing when you fought a rematch with Thiago Alves.
Yeah.
Do you remember how that comes about?
Got a call from Pat and said he got me a fight 2 weeks, Thiago Alves. So I was like jumping through hoops to get medicals done and do all the stuff. And it was California, which I think was maybe the first one they did in California, maybe. And the medicals were like, there was a lot of requirements, I remember, to get like the brain scan and all the stuff you had to do. So yeah, my 2 weeks notice was trying to schedule doctor's appointments and get medical work done and all that stuff.
Do you think they may have requested that fight against you because it's a rematch? It's American Top Team.
Maybe. But I was never told that, so I don't know.
So you were a last minute replacement for Drew Fickett.
Yeah.
So
I had also, I think, 06. So I had been, I did the second Ultimate Fighter tryouts back when you did, like, you submitted a tape and
Really?
they called you and flew you out to Vegas. So I was one of the final, like, 30 people or whatever they flew out to Vegas, but I didn't make obviously I didn't make the final cut of who got in the house. I think that was the year Joe Stevenson won the second season. So I just went out there, did that, and I didn't get on. And then I think I got the call to do that UFC fight a few months after that.
Who do you remember any of the other people that were out there with you?
Yeah. So I'm not gonna be able to remember their names now that you asked me. Joe Stevenson, who's the guy? He ended up fighting the UFC quite a bit. He's from the Northeast, and he was like had the Irish hand grenade.
Marcus Davis.
Marcus Davis was out there. Yeah.
Was Ryan Schultz there?
Yeah, he was there.
Okay, so I asked Chael when we interviewed Chael Sonnen why Ryan Schultz wasn't on The Ultimate Fighter or wasn't in the UFC. He kind of, gave us, it just wasn't his time, went to the IFL. I had heard he was out there with you, and I don't know. But anybody that got that far to The Ultimate Fighter was definitely on the UFC shortlist. And right. You make your appearance against Thiago Alves where you stunned him at one point in the first few exchanges.
Yeah.
Going in for the kill.
That was my first TKO loss, I think.
Yes.
In my career. Yeah.
Yeah. Was that difficult for you?
Yeah, I mean, obviously. Because I was winning. I mean, I had him. I think I had hit him with a liver shot kick, and it kind of buckled him. And I followed him up to the cage, and I was hitting him, and he actually had covered up and like squatted down in a squatting position. And I thought it was going to get close to being stopped, and then he kind of popped back up, and I got real wild and threw a big wide right hook, and he just snuck one in. And he had his head down and eyes closed and just threw a straight one, and it landed.
It's like a Hail Mary. Yeah.
So I wasn't out, but it kind of, I went down. I was just kind of frozen. Like I knew what was going on, but I couldn't react or do anything.
But I want to ask you about the Tough 2 tryout though.
Yeah.
So everybody sends in their tape, hundreds of tapes. They get down to 30 people. You fly out there. So take me through that process. They say, hey, you're coming down Tuesday. And then what happens? You meet a bunch of TV execs. Did you ever meet?
So
how's it go?
So I actually did it. I did that one. And then later on, I did it when it was the open tryout. So I kind of got to experience both of them. But I submitted the tape, like a VHS tape, and filled out the paperwork, and then they just called me. Like, so I got a call from one of the Spike TV producers, and they said, "Hey, we're getting you a ticket to fly out to Vegas." And so, that was exciting. But yeah, you go out there and they pick you up and they like quarantine you off from everything and put you in a hotel, and you can't leave. You gotta, you've got to fill out like a meals list for your food all day.
Room service. Yeah.
Yeah. You're like stuck in your hotel room unless somebody's coming to escort you to go do an interview or do the medicals or all that stuff.
Did you have like a number, like they were secretive, they didn't want to tell you your name? I remember being there and they were like trying to be real secretive about everything.
Yeah. I mean, that's what it was. They didn't want you really talking to anybody else, or, you weren't supposed to let anybody know where you're at. Yeah, you met with the producers of the show. I think I met with Dana White, did an interview with him. And then,
Wow.
after, it's like a 4 or 5 day process. We're out there because they take you out to do all your medicals because they want to make sure you pass all your medicals and that stuff. And then they send you off, and hey, if you get picked, we'll be in contact. And that's that.
So you're there, they send you home, and when you go home, you think you still may have a shot. It's not like you went home, it's like, okay.
Yeah, you didn't find out before you left. You didn't know.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
Did you have a roommate or were you in a room alone?
No, it was, you were alone. You had your own room. Yeah. So you're there like hours at a time, just waiting for like the call of when you were going to go do an interview or whatever.
Okay, so you get stopped by Elvis, and 1.5 months later, you fight Euphoria 7, June 3rd, 2006, against Eddie Alvarez.
Right.
Ooh, another tough fight.
Yeah, no, you're fighting a murderer's row here.
Right.
And when was the last time you saw that bout? You watched it?
I watch it every once in a while. So that's where I was talking earlier, where when I fought Chris, I was like, I'm probably not good enough to be in this fight yet. But I don't recall ever turning a fight down that I was offered. So this fight, I had fought quite a few guys. I was doing well. I lost the fight to Thiago, but I thought, I was winning the fight until he caught me. I should have won that fight. And Joe Silva in the ring said, "Hey, go beat Alvarez and we'll bring you right back." So I completely overlooked that fight. I'm better than this guy.
So he named Eddie Alvarez in the cage to you.
Who's yeah.
Joe Silva?
So he knew I was already scheduled to fight Alvarez when I took the Thiago fight.
Oh,
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah, I had already signed and booked that fight for that. That was a title fight, I believe, for the inaugural title of Euphoria. So yeah, I took that fight on 2 weeks' notice, and then if I had to beat Alvarez, they were gonna, he's like, "We'll sign you back to the UFC." So I was like, thought I was, overconfident going into the fight.
Well, you're definitely bigger than
I paid for it, What's that?
You're bigger, like in size, than Eddie. And all right, I'm not trying to sit here and say there was controversy in regards to the bout, but what I see when I watch it, you've got the referee on one side, you and Eddie are in a clinch. It appears he's thumbing your eye on the opposite side of the referee, and it's the same side he punches you with to finish it.
Yeah, no, that didn't happen.
No, his fingers are in your eye.
Well, I don't remember any eye gouge. I didn't have any eye injuries after the fight.
Maybe it was close. Yeah, maybe it was close. Maybe he was getting, pushing.
Yeah.
But like watching it, I'm just like, whoa. I mean, it's slick on his end.
Right. So the Thiago fight, when he hit me, he hit me like square in the chin, and it kind of pushed my jaw back a little bit. So the whole next 4 or 5 weeks before the Alvarez fight, my jaw hurt, so the first shot he hit me with in that fight, it just like, there it is again. And it threw me off because I felt my jaw when he hit me like start hurting again. And it just, that kind of threw me off a little bit, I think, mentally. And then he just swarmed on me, and that was it.
How was your relationship with Eddie?
Again, I didn't talk to him really. No relationship there.
Did you have any type of like good communications or relationships with any of your opponents, or was
Keith Wisniewski, I was friends with him. I mean, I didn't call him on the phone at night, but you know, we were we were you know, that was probably the guy I would say was the closest guy I ever fought as somebody that I spoke with or was cordial with. But no, I didn't. Again, you know, Alvarez was different parts of the country. I didn't really. He hadn't fought that much, and it was mostly East Coast fights, so I just hadn't really been around him that much.
Yeah, this was before Alvarez actually made his huge run. Derrick, you were your favorite heading into that fight, and you know, what'd you get paid? Do you remember? Because
this is Miguel flexing, Chris. Yeah, I'm never gonna ask that. Like, if I know it's a low pay,
this fight. So this fight, I believe, was 2-2.
Okay, so here we got the 2-2. Okay,
so 200, 200.
Yeah, maybe it might as well have been now, right?
Thank you, thank you, Derrick. I appreciate you lying for me.
Either way, you were underpaid, brother. Sorry.
Yeah, did you ever notice that, Chris? Whenever it's a decent payday and Miguel is a part of it, he always mentions it, but when it isn't, he just kind of hopes I don't bring it up.
Yeah, showcase the right stuff, Mike. Come on, man. You know how this game's played.
All right. So Romez Broward, you get your rematch in AFC.
Yeah.
All right. Neither of you guys are American Top Team guys. Neither of you guys sell a single ticket in Florida. Right. Is this a Dan Lambert favor to you?
Again, you know, I'd never really personally talked to Dan Lambert in all the fights I fought there. So Pat, or, you know, I don't know if it was through Miguel or whoever, you know, just called me and said, hey, we got this fight. And that was it. But yeah, all the fights I was in Florida, I never spoke with him really.
Yeah, I'm going to gamble that this is AFC 19, and I think 15 was the last one I match made. So
okay,
I'm going to give Carlos Diaz a little credit here for hanging on to some of the contacts there from the Midwest.
And this one was at the college, I think. It wasn't at the what was that?
Obviously, you won this fight. You win this fight as well.
Yeah.
You got that drawback.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I choked him out.
Yeah, Florida Atlantic University.
All right. So, Chris, he fights at the International Sports Combat Federation against a very seasoned 1-42 opponent named Kenneth Allen right after this.
What? Is that real?
Who is the promoter?
How's that possible?
What happens here, Derrick? Let us know there's something that happens.
So this is a local show, hometown, Peoria, Illinois. I want to say Ryan Blackorby. He like a mixed Thai boxing, mixed martial arts event. And he wanted to put me on the show, but you know, he at that point in time probably couldn't pay somebody enough to come fight me. So I ended up with that.
Okay.
Now, was this a situation where they had, like, I know before one of my boxing matches, they had somebody fell off right at the end. I already sold a bunch of tickets. So they're like, we got a guy the day before, and they brought down some bum. And I was like, man, don't ever do that again, because he didn't have a record like that, but it wasn't good. So was this like a last minute thing, or just all that?
Yeah, I think it was. I think he got this. I think he got it.
What are you gonna do? It's acceptable.
Yeah. And I think, and honestly, I remember that night, we didn't know if he was going to show up until he actually got to the arena, because he wasn't there. He didn't make the weigh-ins, and Brian's calling him, and he's like, oh yeah, we're on our way. We're in the car. And, you know, I think it was maybe an hour before the fight and they actually showed up.
What did he get paid for that? As I'm sure he made more than you.
What's that?
Well, I wonder what he got paid for that. I'm sure he made more than you.
I didn't get paid that much for it, but I just wanted to fight on a local show, because at that point in time I was not fighting really around home anymore.
Miguel, in your opinion, do you think Derrick Noble severed his way into this bout?
I don't know, man. You know,
the verb now. Dan
Severn trying to illegitimize that win from me, or what?
just saying.
Take it off.
Look, the bottom
line is that was the 50th one.
We honor the Midwest grind here, and you know, Derrick, obviously we got guys that have been through it for real, but here's a moment for the Kenneth Allens of the world, because let's go through this. He fought Romez Brower, fought Pat O'Malley, fought Nick Lenz, fought Jake Ellenberger, fought Brock Larson, fought Sam Morgan, fought Tyrone Roberts, fought Joe Jordan, Derrick Noble. I mean, those.
He fought about a dozen UFC vets.
Yeah, there's some serious people. After that, it dropped off a little bit. But at the beginning of his career, he looks like one of those sturdy guys that you might be able to, that looks good against anybody because, some of those
how did
guys
he look physically? Do you look like he just got out of jail? Was his fingernails real dirty?
No, if I remember correctly, he looked like, he could fight.
What kind of studio tattoos or something done in someone's basement? What? What are we working with here?
I didn't examine him that.
Did he have holes in his t-shirt? When he walked to the ring. All right, enough.
Cut off jeans.
Now, just to put this in perspective, Derrick, did you ever fight in the old days on a show where people still wore shirts?
I don't think I.
Silverback.
No, yeah. I've seen it on shows I fought on. Sure, yeah. I never was involved in any of those fights, but
Derrick, at one of your early Silverbacks challenges, I was there.
Yeah.
Who's the guy from Wisconsin that fought Rampage Jackson twice? Rob.
Okay, Rob Smith.
Rob Smith,
yeah.
One of Rob Smith's opponents was drinking like a grape knee high in the corner instead of water. I mean, and he had a shirt on. So you fought on those cards.
Yeah, I mean, not everybody that fought on those cards went on to become great, mixed martial artists.
I would say even individuals. Forget mixed martial artists. I would say great individuals.
Good point.
So
that was for a lot of the guys. I think that was the peak of their career.
Oh, absolutely.
It's a shame to take your little baby's last knee high and drink it for a pre-fight drink, man.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember a dude was smoking cigarettes, pacing back and forth, and I'm like, who's he coaching? And then he announced his name.
He's fighting.
He's fighting.
He felt the cigarette
fights. A lot of those fights back then were in bars, So people were having a drink and a smoke. We were in a bar.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, how else are you going to calm your pre-fight nerves? I mean, come on. So you go to Miguel, obviously leaves AFC, as he just had said at this point, and he starts another organization on his Bulldog fight. And December 16, 2006, he matches you against Jake Ellenberger.
Yeah.
Okay.
How much did you make for this fight?
Jesus Christ. Miguel,
I don't remember.
You did to start lying down, and that question ends.
I didn't keep a record tracker of all my paydays for these.
You know what this is, Derrick? The statute of limitations of paying taxes is far surpassed. You can absolutely tell us Miguel gave you 15, 20 grand a fight.
I mean, I made enough money to buy dinner that night and have a few drinks and maybe buy a new pair of shoes when I got home.
There we go.
Where was this Bodog Fight Clash of Nations battle? St. Petersburg, Russia.
So they flew you to Russia. This is the brilliance of Miguel Iterate. He flies you to Russia to fight a top-tier Jake Ellenberger, future UFC vet. Jake walks out with two cornermen, Chael Sonnen and Matt Lindland. And
I've heard of those guys.
Yeah, maybe. And Derrick, who was cornering you there?
So at that point in time, I had training. So I'd left Strasser's and I started school down in Eastern Illinois. So I was training with the wrestling team down there. I was actually coaching their strength and conditioning coach. So Kyle Watson was in my corner.
I was hoping you didn't get a corner, dude, and you had to go to a locker room special.
No, yeah,
and this dude's walking out with Chael Sonnen and Matt Lindland. Miguel, you caught a blessing, Watson. Brother. You caught a blessing, Miguel.
I was allowed one corner guy. Yes.
Oh, really, Miguel?
Yeah, I'd have to look at who they were with.
Okay, Miguel. Thank you. So we're gonna get on with the
interview. He
interview.
didn't fly him out.
Thanks, Miguel, for nothing.
I know what it was. Jeremiah Constant and Jake Ellenberger each got one corner man. That'd be Lindland and Sonnen.
Oh.
Now what do you think, Mike?
Chris. Oddly enough, they're from the same gym. So in other words, all right, I'm going to bring 2 cornermen down when they could have had 1, which is probably what you did to the rest of the Midwest guys. But we're going to move on, Miguel. Please don't interrupt my interview. So you beat Jake Ellenberger, lots of body work, and you're back on the winning side again. Obviously, you're starting to get a roll. And Miguel, you're not done with these Russians. You're throwing against Erik Oganov, April 14, 2007, in Russia. Man, dude, do you before I go on my little tirade about what took place there, why don't you kind of give us what you think happened?
Yeah, so that if I remember, there's 2 fights I've had in my career that I would dispute shouldn't have been stopped. All my losses, I accept them. That one I don't accept because that actually was the referee. I think Troy Wald was the referee, and he asked me if I was all right, and I told him I'm fine, and he stopped the fight. And then afterwards, he's like, "Oh, I thought you told me to stop it." I'm like, "No, I didn't say that at all." So,
That's about as bad a mistake as a ref is going to make.
Well, that's actually that is bad. But let's talk about like what led up to this. So one, you got Brian Garrity in your corner. So obviously Miguel stiffed you again because you're not training there. So we're not going to address that. Do you want to talk about your pay? Let's get that question out of the way. Miguel, sorry for taking all your questions.
I may.
What about your pay?
I may have not got a corner for that fight if I recall.
Oh! All right. So this is what happens. Erik Oganov, Russian top team. They bring in Derrick Noble. No corner. No big deal. I mean, obviously the setup's not there, Miguel. They bring Troy Wine, an American referee, that Erik punches, like at the end of the first round, punches Derrick after the referee broke them up. And then on the ground, uses the ropes to gain mount. Again, Troy Wine lets that happen. And then he takes a knee to the groin. Yeah. And Troy Wah still doesn't do anything except when, this Russian Erik Oganov's on top and he's really not doing much. He says, hey, he kept warning Oganov of potential fouls that he was creating. But what he was doing, because he was fouling, grabbing the ropes and things of that nature. And then he asked Derrick, you okay? Derrick goes, yeah, I'm fine. And with no real damage, he comes in and stops the fight. How much do you think Miguel had a play in that fight, like with all that nonsense and shenanigans?
I haven't thought of it like that, but now it makes sense.
I do.
Like he had to win that fight. I was not going to be allowed to win that fight.
So Derrick, you got to remember, I'm the MMA detective, and we started this with Trump Taj Mahal. The Russians go like 2-8 against the Americans. So he goes, okay, Russian guys,
I'll take care of it. Let
me take care of this. April 14, 2007, it's a few years ahead of the time, but we're going to do this little favor like 2 or 3 years from now. And I think this is the fight that happened. Miguel.
He's playing the long game.
It's a real long game. That's right. Miguel, what do you have to say? I mean, now that you've been caught red-handed, obviously, based on the evidence presented.
That was a fun show. It was that was the last show that we would do in Russia, and I gotta be honest with you, I don't remember the specifics of that particular fight, but I can tell you, God's honest truth is that day was not Troy Wall's best friggin' day.
Well, if you watch the fight,
awful
announcers Jeff Osborne, and they were even saying they don't know what happened, should be an immediate rematch and this or the other.
Okay, wait. Did they say we don't know what happened? Kind of like when Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels wrestled and Bret Hart was leaving. Was it kind of cover for Miguel, or was it like a legitimate we don't know what happened there?
Yeah. Hey, because
I'm just trying to get a guilty verdict anyway. I can get it, Derrick. At this point, I'm thinking.
Troy fucked up the Fedor Lindland main event too. So
was it the same card, Miguel?
Yeah. So
dude, he was off that night.
He was off that night, and I'm looking at, and I don't recall. Like, I know Sean Brockmull wasn't there, and maybe Carlos, maybe Chad Wagner, but 13 fights is a lot of fights to ref.
Well, here, why don't
you?
You kinda...
It's way too many for one person on one night. I'm not making excuses for him, but I don't know for sure that he was the only ref that night, but that's two world-class mistakes. So you know,
So Miguel,
had better days.
why don't you explain what took place in the main event that where he also screwed that up as well? And I like Troy, I might add.
Yeah, you know, I would still take him over most refs, you know, especially if he's on, because he's a very good ref. But like we said, in the main event, Matt Lindland comes out and throws the first punch, big looping punch, and hits Fedor. And Fedor, you can see Fedor back off, and Fedor does this because he's bleeding from the first punch. So that's a significant moment. Lindland closes and ties him up, you know, hands behind, high shoulder lock. A good spot for a Greco guy to be in. And Fedor sort of did the like, hey, I'm on the ropes thing, and to the point where he should have been stopped and the fight should have been reset, maybe even a point taken, because warning him was not working. He was warned at least 3 or 4 times to not tie up on the ropes. And then Fedor is Fedor. The bottom line is he held off, and then he picked his moment to get Lindland and take him down with a judo throw, and he wound up in his position resisting Lindland's takedown, but Lindland had him.
I think he used the ropes in order to gain that position too.
Yeah, the ropes.
Yeah,
it was bad enough that at some point he should have been warned to the point where they should have been broken up and stuff. You know, and so Troy, like I said, Troy, maybe it was a Fedor fight, maybe it was, you know, the 8th or 10th fight he did, which is still too many fights in a day.
Yeah.
I don't know, but he was sucking wind by, you know, with the Noble fight too. So you know, like I said, I love Troy. Don't want to knock him, but that wasn't his best day.
Yeah, I mean, it happens. It does legitimately happen. But on top of that, Derek, if you look at your performance, there was a few instances where you were in trouble, and man, I think about 80% of that locker room may have wilted while weathering that storm, and you just kept leveling up. And I think that's where Erik Oganov, I think he was ready to break because you weren't bending. Like, you weren't bending at all. And I think he got lucky that night. I mean, a lot of things fell in his favor. And I can see why you don't accept that loss, because you were clearly winning that fight. And it wasn't by a little. Like, there was a large margin in regards to you know, what you were doing and what he was doing. And yeah, I mean, it's,
like I said, I mean, it was pretty clear. For one, I think he ended up getting my back or some position change, and he was kind of hitting me like with just little hits. I had my hand up here, and he's hitting me on the arm, and it wasn't really affecting me. And he, you know, he's like, "Are you all right? Are you all right?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm okay." And then he just stopped the fight, and I immediately was like, "You know what the hell just happened?" So,
well, I think what differentiates yourself and many other people, obviously, we had talked about this taking place in the past, even though you were wrong, like you were clearly wronged on this. And, you know, I mean, Miguel, you're in agreement with it. During the hand raising ceremony, you stood there, you allowed it to take place. It kind of, well, it showed like you had a legitimate beef going, no, this fight isn't it. No, I'm not accepting it. Rather than doing that, you went through with it and knew that, hey, this is just a part of the game. Any conversations that are going to happen, this isn't going to affect it either way. You showed what a professional you were. Like, it's honestly very, very commendable on your end.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just, like I said, I've never really been that way, so I wasn't going to make a scene about it or anything. But was disappointed for sure.
Well, a scene's not going to help. Like, if you really, but you can see how somebody might be emotional at that point because they literally think they got screwed.
And at this point, for me, like all these fights, now I'm actually like trying to like make a career, you know. So taking a loss like that affects me quite a bit. So you know, it's disappointing.
Okay, so you only fought 2 times in 2008, and one of them was the MFC Maximum Fighting Championship against Ariel Sexton, who, Miguel, Costa Rica fame on your end. I know he fought on a couple local cards with that of yourself. What was that experience like? Because I know the MFC right now is no longer in existence.
Yeah. Other than the fact, like, they always had me up there in the winter time, and you know, I mean, I enjoyed it.
Ice fishing to kill the time.
I think my first is Edmonton, right? I think.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was cold. But I mean, I was treated well up there, and the event was nice. I mean, it was in like a casino arena type thing, and yeah, it was good. And I think that was when I dropped to 155, I believe.
It was at 55. It was your first fight at 55.
Yeah, I hated it.
How's the weight cut there? I mean,
yeah,
terrible?
yeah, it was bad. I had a tough time because that's the point. I was in Minnesota now. So I'm training Minneapolis with Thompson and Sean Shirk at the Greg Nelson's school and Brock Larson and all those guys.
Just what brought you up there?
Training. So like I said, this is where I'm like, actually, like, hey, I'm going to try to keep doing this and like, you know, fighting some of the best guys, you know, so I moved there to have a better place to train at. So, and then in the gym, you know, all these guys I'm training with are all 170 pounders and they're all way bigger than me at this point. Because I'm just through my training, I'm walking around at like 177, 176. And, you know, these guys are 195, 200 pounds cutting down. So I'm like, I don't recall any fights where I felt like size or strength at 170. I lost the fight because of that, but it was still in the room. I was smaller than most of the 170 pounders that I was training with. Okay. So I was like, you know what, maybe I'll drop to 155 and try it out. So the lowest I could ever get my walking weight to was about 168. So I was going from 68 to 56. You know, you get the pound, so I get to 56. You know, in one day or one night or whatever.
You were always real disciplined with that, you know. It's
and I had, you know, moving up there with those guys, I kind of dialed in diet and weight cut, and I was way more professional about it than I had been. 170 was never really a hard cut for me. 8 or 9 pounds maybe if I was heavy. But yeah, 13, you know, I was doing 13, 14 pounds to get to 55.
And how was Sexton? Because Sexton, actually, I did a reality TV show that he was part of down in Costa Rica that we filmed for 3 months. I lived in a house with him. So
yeah, no, he was tough. I think, you know, that was a fight based on experience and records. I was supposed to win, or I should have won, and I did. But he was tough.
He was tough.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, he's a good little fighter. But I when I heard he was fighting, you know, in the States against Derrick, I was like, well, nobody asked me about that one. But no, definitely a good job. And yeah, you got to win those, and that's what it's all about.
Yeah. You know, we're gonna fast forward a little bit. You had mentioned his name earlier, Yves Edwards, who, my opinion, first ballot Hall of Famer. Not in the UFC Hall of Fame. Certainly belongs there. What was it like sharing the ring with him?
Yeah, I mean, that's another fight. Even at that point in my career, I'd fought in the UFC and fought a lot of really good guys, but I still was like, this is a step up, you know, another step up fight. I mean, so, but
where'd you fight him at? Where was it?
Same show.
Yeah,
MFC.
Okay.
But before that, I had fought Antonio McKee up there. So I fought Antonio McKee in the title fight. I lost a 5-round decision to him. And then I fought Yves after that up there. So those are my 3 fights at 155. And then I was like, nah, not doing that anymore. Because I didn't feel bigger or stronger than those guys at 55.
Did you feel like sucked out? It
was just, I wasn't enjoying it. It was too much. Dieting and cutting weight. I couldn't focus on training. Every day I was just focused on what I'm eating or drinking.
Weight cut. Here's the thing too. The thing I don't think people realize is when you drop weight, these guys are fast. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they're speed. I mean, the lighter you get, I feel like the more athletic and quick. People are just. I mean, it's going to be tough to be down there and to be that much bigger and stronger and make that. If that's your game, holding people down, but. Yeah. You're a striker and you're going in with the guys who are fast. That's tough, man. So I don't like that idea. People just dropping weight. I don't get it.
Yeah, it didn't work out like I planned it.
Man, do you know who?
And you know, the two, you know, my 2 losses there against McKee and Edwards. Those are
there's no shame in that.
Pretty good guys.
Yeah.
So right around that time, like pro wrestling is actually like almost like I'm not gonna say it was at an all-time high, but it was definitely very popular. And Paul Heyman was actually in attendance at that card. And there was a rumor that he was going to start working with the UFC. Like they were going to bring him over to help create storylines, make fighters more interesting. It never panned out, but Heyman started showing up at like MMA events all over the country just to kind of get a feel and understanding of what it was. And, you know, he might be one of pro wrestling's brightest minds.
Yeah,
Did you get a chance to meet him?
I didn't at that point. No.
You said you were up with,
I would have never have known that until you just told me.
like didn't you said you were up with Greg Nelson and those people? Did you run into Lesnar, Brock Lesnar? Because
yeah, he was. That's when he was at the gym training. Yeah.
What was that like?
Well, I mean, at that point in time, he had his own crew. So we had
like a posse.
Well, he brought in his own training partners. You know, he didn't like just have the guys at the gym. So he was at the gym, but he brought his own guys in to train with. So heavyweight guys.
That's what I was gonna say. That makes sense. I mean, what's he gonna do with 170 pounds?
Yeah.
But did he feel like part of the team?
Nah, I wouldn't say so.
I wouldn't.
Like at the end of practice, when you guys would get in a circle and put your hands in and say team, did he do that?
No. Like I said, he came in on his own time with his own crew, and you know, it wasn't a lot of.
Did he do any catchphrases like no E, like there's no I in team, but there's an E in me, like Chris just said?
I mean,
me.
You know, I didn't really, I wasn't a big fan of it, even though we were
really
the same gym. Yeah.
Miguel, this is where we clip this out. Hold up, let me take it. So Derrick, what exactly did he do to make you not a fan of his?
It wasn't anything he did to me personally. It's just, you know.
Derrick, come on, dude. We're trying to get
it just seems. I mean, it seems like he wouldn't have been like, you know, you have camaraderie with people because you're a part of the same squad. It doesn't sound like he is that.
Chris,
he's in the gym, but he's not the gym.
He had that like I'm Brock Lesnar mentality. So
there we go. Yeah. Chris, hold up. We're trying to get views here. Let me ask, what did he do to make you not a fan of his? Go ahead.
I mean, I wanted to take a picture with him in the gym, and he told me no.
Oh my God, Miguel, clip.
And we're teammates, right? We're supposed to be teammates.
That's unbelievable.
He actually did say that. So
hold on, what?
We were told when he first started coming in that Brock didn't want anybody in there taking pictures, all this stuff. But kind of immediately threw me off because I'm like, I don't want to take his picture anyway.
Yeah.
But you know,
but if I want to, I'm going to, you mother piece of shit.
Wait, so
I'll do what I want.
Who had this conversation? Was this like Greg Nelson?
No, I mean it was just like, you know, you're in the gym and it's just you that's what you hear, you know. Because I had been there before he started training there. And then once he was starting to come in, that was just kind of one of those things that was going around.
Wait, did anybody in the gym, like for instance, like if you would get like, you know, gyms are crowded. So whenever he would get in somebody else's space, would they like, this is my house, don't you disrespect me? Would they like kind of go off on him like that or no?
No, I didn't see any
too
of that.
Bad. Man.
Did you ever sit and watch him train?
Yeah, I mean, I watched a little bit of it, but again, he would come in. We had our times, like the pro fighters would come in and do their thing in the afternoons, and he would come in a little bit after, like me and Shirk and Thompson and the smaller guys, I guess.
Like who was on his
under 200 pounders? What's that?
Was Travis View?
Yeah, Travis View was coming in a little bit.
Caprito?
Yeah, he was bringing him in.
Cole Conrad?
What's that?
Cole Conrad?
I believe he was there a little bit.
Wait a minute. Were you there when Mark Kerr was there?
No, I never saw Mark
Kerr.
Now, if from what I heard, tell me if you noticed this, anytime when he was training, from what I gathered, people really weren't allowed to hit him very hard or really touch him to the face very much. Did you ever notice any of that where they frowned upon it heavily?
Yeah, I mean, I can't validate that, I guess, because I wasn't part of his training session. So
what did you hear?
I mean, I've heard that, but I also think that, you know, he didn't bring in a whole lot of guys that were better than him, you know, necessarily.
Okay. So we had Nick Thompson on, obviously, you know, that you and Nick are real close.
Right.
And we pushed that. Like I said that to Nick, and he's like, no, not necessarily. You know, he was pretty open.
Nick loves Brock, so he's not going to say anything bad about it.
I
still argue with Nick about
Nick's
this.
A liar.
I still argue with Nick about this today. I mean, he's a Brock Lesnar fanboy, so he won't say anything negative.
It's embarrassing.
So, he is. Did he get a picture with Sable, or did he?
I mean, that probably wasn't allowed. You couldn't have a camera. I don't know.
Okay. All right. So, Chris, we've hit a couple benchmarks here. We've first flight, screwed over in a different country. Obviously, you know,
Miguel.
Yeah, I mean, dude, Miguel is what it is, dude. Don't worry, buddy. You're not going anywhere, Miguel. You're staying. You're good. So, if I had to pick a time where Derrick Noble gets screwed on cash, Miguel, you got lucky this interview, obviously. It had to have been May 15, 2010. Don King has, Shine Fights takes place. The main event was Ricardo Mayorga versus Din Thomas. And you were Derrick Noble.
Can I cut you off real quick since you're talking about pay? One of the best paid fights I had was with Hardcore Fighting Championships in Canada. And I fought Brendan Seguin in Calgary, Canada.
Brendan, I remember him.
I got paid pretty good for that. I think like Shogun was on that card, and the smaller Nogueira brother, Rogerio. So it was a big event. Mike Pyle fought on that card.
Nice.
Yeah. So that just since you.
Hey, what'd you get paid?
Pay a lot. They paid pretty well up there, but they only had a few shows.
Okay.
That's why, because they paid too much.
Yeah, that's.
So let me kind of paint this picture, and you know, let me get through it before, because I this has got to be it. So Shine Fights comes along, and Ricardo Mayorga, world championship boxer, world class fighter, is supposed to fight Din Thomas in the main event. It's boxing. Oh no, it's MMA. I apologize. MMA. You're supposed to fight Eduardo Pamplona, and the event was announced in September of 2009. This was May 15, 2010. Don King, who technically manages Mayorga, says absolutely nothing when all this press was coming around, kept his mouth shut, and then on the day of the event, he filed an emergency injunction and had the show canceled.
Yeah.
Walk us through this.
I mean, it was like maybe 45 minutes before the show was supposed to start. We got canceled. I was in the locker room warming up, like I was dressed with my gloves on.
Wow.
Then they come back and they're like, hey, I mean, the crowd is there. Everyone's there.
Oh, and the audience was there? Oh,
yeah,
my.
I mean, everyone was there. It was like, it was a pay-per-view event too. It was getting ready to go on pay-per-view.
How's that legal to do that? Like, I don't get it.
It's like he purposely waited till the very last minute and got a judge that like last minute filed the injunction.
What was the grounds?
That he's contracted under Don King Promotions, I think.
Right.
And he was fighting for another organization without.
What? So, I mean, you should be able to cancel the whole event, cancel the main event.
So this is what he did. He sued the venue.
Yeah, I don't know.
Why
know.
Can't you sue a venue?
I don't know the legality.
Because they're holding an illegal event. He probably sent legal work to the venue, to the athletic commission, to the promoter. I mean, because if it's just the promoter's going to go, man, we're going to figure this shit out in court. Like, we're definitely, you got the crowd there.
I want to say, and again, don't quote me, but I want to say there was some issue with like, I don't know, like when you hold these events, you have to have like, what is it, like bonds or something, like a certain amount of money to cover the expenses. Escrow. And they didn't have, I think, all the money they needed to cover some of the, what they were supposed to have.
Oh, so there was multiple issues.
That was an issue too.
You know, for the first time, I'm starting to think that maybe Don King might not be such a great guy. I hadn't really thought of that before.
Always seen up and up. So did you get stiffed or did you get paid?
So no. So Nick Thompson was the one that got me that fight, and he got me paid. I got paid my full purse. $7,000. Wow. I got $7,000 and I didn't fight.
So you got paid 5 Bodog experiences.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Wow.
That's pretty cool though. You got paid.
And you didn't fight.
Yeah.
No damage.
I did everything except fight. I made the weight cut and weighed in and warmed up. And
Wow.
Wait, how do they inform you?
Flew out there, so you got to pay me something for that.
Oh yeah.
How do you get informed of
that it
this?
was canceled?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Show
they
was
just-
canceled?
Yeah, they just
They just
wandered
came.
through the.
They came in the locker room. Some officials basically said, "Hey, the show's not happening," and then everyone, has confused and trying.
Oh, come on.
Yeah.
So what about the people in the audience? Was there booing? Did they make the announcement over the loudspeaker? Can you imagine having to refund all those? Oh my God.
Yeah, I don't know how with all that, honestly.
We're starting to lose you a little bit in the connection. So
Yeah,
but I wanted.
It's
I wanted
happening
to-
on my end too. A little bit.
Okay, I wanted to ask you about Mayorga. Did he put on a show at all at the weigh-ins or anything? Did he become a spectacle? Because he fought here in Costa Rica and it wound up with immigration chasing him. He escaped the venue through the bathroom window and crossed the border to Nicaragua on his own with no help. So
Is that real?
Yeah.
Mayorga could be a very interesting dude.
Chris,
Yeah.
Ricardo Mayorga, if he spoke English, these things that he would say, because I speak fluent Spanish like Miguel, the things that he would say after his fights were so crazy that even a translator would be like, yeah, I'm not saying that.
Hey, I loved it, but when he knocked out Vernon Forrest and then he starts smoking cigarettes and drinking beer, he's like, "No, there's men in my country that I don't know what you guys are. You guys are." Just started going off on people and gave away all his money. He's a legitimate lunatic.
He gave away all of his money to get power to the
Village.
city that he was in, and he said like after his
I want to be
first
poor.
fight, he's like, if I'm not poor, I can't win. I still want to win fights, and if I have money, I'm not going to win. So I can't have this. And he gave it all away. He gave it all away.
I remember that. Yeah. Oh, maniac!
Yeah.
I love it too.
He would say things like, I'm with Don King, F you. He'd be telling he'd be naming his buddies at home, telling them to suck his I'm sitting next to Don King. I just won this mother effer. And he'd be calling out his buddies at the bar at home. Yeah. Yeah, dude, Mayorga was a madman. He was just something. I wish he spoke English because he'd be huge. He would have been huge. Yeah. So Derrick, let's talk about some of your relationships. Would you mind talking about Ron Faircloth?
Yeah, I mean, I've been around, just through the scene and up to start training up there in Kenosha. Pretty much hanging out with him quite a bit. Am I still going in and out here? Because
a little bit.
A little bit.
Like it's
a little bit. I'm done with my questions.
It's this hotel Wi-Fi, I think. That. Oh, go ahead.
So Ron Faircloth. You training with him? How was your relationship with him?
Yeah, it was pretty. Tight with all those guys. O'Malley, and obviously it was my manager, and Thompson and Faircloth. So years, I was kind of hanging out with those guys on a regular basis and pretty tight. And then contact with Ron. When I moved to Minnesota, I didn't really stay in contact with him too much.
So was it Nick Thompson who you started talking to who kind of said, "Hey man, there's some really good training out here. You might want to come out this way"? Is that how that relationship, or is that how that moved over?
It kind of cut out on me there. I'm sorry.
Okay. No, I was just saying that. Was it the Nick Thompson connection? Is that how got you out to Minnesota? He said, "Hey man, there's great training out here. You might need to come out." Is that why you went out to Minnesota?
Yep, that's exactly it. So I had trained with Thompson, and then he was in Minnesota. And I was down training in Eastern Illinois with Daniel and Kenny Robertson.
Yeah.
Those guys. And I just talking through Nick, he invited me up to Minnesota, and I went up there training, and then I moved up there.
How many concussions do you think you've had?
Concussions?
Yeah.
I think I got any fighting in actual competitions. Maybe a few in the gym, but I don't. My whole career, I was never knocked out, out, I'm around.
Yeah.
Out. So I was TKO'd a few times, and so I don't know. I don't recall ever being for days after getting hit, kind of being dizzy or feeling bad or sick or anything.
Do you think, do you have any memory issues or anything like that?
No. I mean, I don't stuff, but once it's brought up, then I can, okay, I remember all that. Kind of like talking here, you know, there's things that I would know until it's brought up in a conversation. Then if I come back and start remembering.
Okay. Chris, I'll wrap this up.
Absolutely. Hey, Derrick, it's been great. I love the old school stories and all the things you had to go through. Just crazy hearing like just the killer murderers row of everybody you fought, just throwing the wolves the whole time. I absolutely love it. So just want to thank you for your time. Appreciate it. What you done for the sport. And thanks for sharing with us.
Hey, I'm glad I finally made it on. A lot of cancellations. So appreciate it.
No, I appreciate you. You definitely deserve your spot. You're one of those guys who, you know, is an unsung hero of the sport for sure. Thank you very much for everything you gave in the ring, man.
All right.
Hey, we got another deep dive into books, Lights Out podcast. Mike Davis, MMA detective, Miguel Arada here. And we just got done with Derrick Noble. Lytle bailed on us too, but Noble, you know, wow, man, it was a long
here,
it was a little
Miguel.
bit of a memory, like God.
Here, you booked him a lot of fights. Now that you've obviously got your perspective, you've heard his. How did you personally? Because I mean, you're a really nice guy. How did you walk away from this interview feeling in regards to the interaction that you had with him?
Look, you know, he put in a lot of work for me, and I kind of sort of like, you know, we were joking around about pay and stuff like that, but like at some point when he fought on Bodog and things like that, I almost feel like he didn't get like a little prize fight or a fight where I gave him a good bump or something like that. Like he fell between the cracks for me, and figuring that out in this interview was like live. That hurt because
did it hurt you?
Yeah, because you know, there was no reason for it. You know, he deserved it. He had earned it. And if it didn't happen, it was just because I fell short or whatever. And you know, that sometimes you can only do so much for people, you know. But if I had gotten a chance to do something for him, he definitely deserved it. And I that hurt me. I felt bad.
So I'm going to be honest with you. We've got like a 20+ year relationship between the two of us. I kind of sensed that you were kind of feeling a little bit bad about it, because if there was one fault that you had in the MMA industry, is that like you cared too much. Like whenever we have a guest on here that appears to be a little bit piggish with the money, you are so offended by that, and it's probably the reason, you know, you didn't stick around longer, because you weren't, you know, just so greedy and money hungry. But I also try to keep it light because, one, I knew you were kind of feeling that way, but also I think where you failed to see about yourself is the opportunity that you gave guys like Derrick. We're talking about a guy from this little podunk town in the middle of Illinois, or southern Illinois, that 90%, he's from Cuba, Illinois. You know, 99% of the country doesn't even know that city exists. And you got a guy such as yourself who was in charge of ADCC, built HOOKSHOOT, Bodog Fight, you know, Euphoria, and you consistently looked out for him and hoping to give him the fight that he needed. Like if he beat Yves Edwards, holy cow. If he beat, Eddie Alvarez.
Alvarez was the big one. He didn't fight Yves for me, but yeah, Alvarez was the one that if he had won, it probably would have made a difference to the whole rest of his career. But it wasn't meant to be. And Alvarez, you know, had his own trajectory, I guess. So his own plan.
But the opportunity was there. And
no, I appreciate that, but it's a hit and miss game, you know, and it's one of those things where, you know, Derrick is definitely on the list of unsung heroes. And, you know, if anybody could give it a little love, like anything on there, it helps us out. And, you know, give Derrick a little love too. Get out on the internet and watch some of his old fights and stuff like that and be entertained, man. He was worth it.
And Miguel, that's what this podcast is all about. you're not going to know every single guest, as a listener that we have on here. However, if we can make it entertaining, kind of give you a different, aspect or component of the moving parts that take place to make a mixed martial art event work, well, that's kind of our job. And I thought we met that need. We fulfilled that goal, on our side. And you being in a position of power at that time, and you could kind of see how things played out. Man, Miguel, listen, dude, we all owe you a thank you, including Chris Lido. So it was kind of nice to see like how involved you were in the career of a guy who we all obviously respect.
Yeah, and I think the same goes for just about anybody who stepped into the cage with Derrick, and that's what you get here. A lot of meat and potato fight, Midwest stuff here with the grind. Thank you, Derrick, with the grind.
Check out the full interview on iTunes, Spotify, and all major podcast platforms.